All right, we are good to go for the September 27th, 2021 study session, which is an evaluation of the Jerry Ivey water feature today. So I will turn that over to Parks and Rec staff, and we can get started taking a look at that.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Jeff Hammond, Deputy Parks and Recreation Director. Today we have for a presentation for you regarding the Jerry Ivey Pond at Jerry Ivey Memorial Park. Jeff Bartley with Water's Edge Aquatic Design is here, and I will be introducing him shortly. Just some how we got here steps that I'm going to go over. On March 2nd of 2020, there was a presentation to you all about the condition of the pond at Jerry Ivey Park and some estimated costs of repair. This was at the time, this was working in conjunction with some funds from the EPA. But comments that day from the commissioners during the meeting were to look into repair it, renovating it, downsizing the feature, replacing it with a different feature, filling it in, abandoning it altogether. There's other topics discussed about removing waterfowl, issues surrounding the waterfowl, and the meeting concluded with looking for options of what we can do with the pond. On March 22nd of this year, based on your direction, we looked into options and determined the direction to look into options and determining costs with renovating the pond. Staff issued a request for qualifications in January for qualified aquatic design firms to study the existing pond, evaluate its strengths and weaknesses, what features could be incorporated into a renovation of the space, water clarity, algae control, and managing the wildlife there. Firms were specifically contacted about responding to the request for qualifications, and Water's Edge Aquatic Design was contracted to provide those services. And that's where we're at today. The Parks and Rec Master Plan has this item ranked as number 9 to address. The priority matrix of the master plan specifically states Jerry Ivey Pond leaks and does not have a water recirculation feature. The water stays green from duck and goose fecal matter and food that visitors feed them. Funding from this project would be from the sales tax park maintenance fund. Currently, there is an approximate fund balance of $1.3 million of that fund, with the anticipated $500,000 from next year as well. So, putting it at about $1.8 million. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jeff Bartley with Water's Edge Aquatic Design.
If I could offer one clarification, more so for the listeners at home, I think. Mr. Hammond referred to the conversation we had about EPA funding, and you may recall that was about $65,000 worth of funding directed at water quality improvements, so it wasn't near the scope and extent that we're talking about. And that kind of adds some context to, we started that conversation, and you as the City Commission understandably said, well, let's have a broader conversation about repairing, replacing, that kind of got us to where we are today. So I didn't want anyone to think that there was EPA funding that we'd passed on that would have solved what we're talking about today.
That EPA funding was specifically in lieu of paying a fine to the EPA for some violations for spreading contaminated material.
Correct. We had an
sludge.
influx of molybdenum that came in our inflow stream. We're not sure what customer caused that, but then that created a violation, and so it was associated with that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Again, my name is Jeff Bartley. I'm an engineer with Water's Edge Aquatic Design. I was leading up this effort, this feasibility study on what to do with Jerry Ivey Park water feature. And with me, we had Landworks Studio, as a landscape architecture firm based in Kansas City that we worked with to conduct this study. So I'm here to present kind of a status update of where we are with that and share results of some, thank you, Jeff, share results of some findings as well as some options that we prepared for you. So next slide, please. Here's what I have to present to you or discuss today. A little background, the findings that we've concluded from the evaluation. We did conduct an open house early in the process in this room, allowed the public to come here and offer input on their opinion of Jerry Ivey Park. We developed some concept options that I'm going to share with you, and then we presented those concept options to the public on a web forum, and I have results from that to share with you. So start with background. A little background, obviously Jerry Ivey was constructed in 1997, and it was done largely by city staff with limited resources. So that's one thing I like to keep in mind is it was done with a limited resource, and it's become quite an asset to the community. So there have been some criticisms about this pond, about the water feature, but in my opinion, it's pretty amazing that you provided this to the citizens some time ago, given the limited funding that you used on it. So little few key points on the pond. Constructed with a bentonite clay liner. The perimeter walls were constructed of these stacked concrete bags, and that was, I believe, done by city staff. The pond is filled using a well in the area, and of course, I mentioned the city has hired us to conduct a study on it. Next slide, please. So this is the existing site. As you can see, the pond right in the center, and of course, you can see the lime green color that it has. Within the pond, it has a wood pier structure that has been recently removed by city staff. It has an aerated spray feature in the center of it. There's a gazebo that's located directly to the south. And then close by, it actually has a walking path or trails that surround the pond, which are very popular with your constituency. And then nearby, it has the splash pad located to the north. Next slide, please. So some findings that we've concluded. An obvious or key part is the perimeter wall that's built of the stacked concrete blocks. Those are disintegrating. They've been coming apart over time, and those are failing and will need to be replaced at some point in the near future. The sidewalk all along the west side is settled, creating trip hazards in certain areas. I suspect that is due to some drainage on that west side where the ground is sloped towards the pond coming from the west to the east, and it's creating water flow underneath the sidewalk and underneath the walls, causing some erosion under that and allowing that sidewalk and those walls to move. Again, and I mentioned the wood pier has been removed recently by park staff. Next slide. In the water quality, that's a primary focus for your staff and for the public. It obviously has a large geese population on the water that's creating problems. There's quite a bit of algae growth, which is a combination of the organic matter that the geese are leaving, along with the fact that the pond's relatively shallow. It's about 3 foot deep all around. So the water temperature is relatively warm, and that helps facilitate the algae growth. And there's limited fresh dilution since it's a well-fed pond and not, say, surface water that influxes in and leaves. What happens is all the water that comes in comes from the well, and what leaves is evaporated rather than stormwater runoff carrying some of that debris. So you continuously add the organic matter to the pond and evaporate the water, so it's building those concentrations over time. It does collect debris on the north end where prevailing wind is blowing whatever debris collects on the surface, gets trapped on the north end of the pond. Next slide. The gazebo we've discovered is a very popular feature with the community. A lot of photo opportunities, a lot of events, weddings even that have occurred there. It's a wood structure. It has weathered over time and is in need of painting and perhaps replacement for the wood shingles. Next slide. There's a stream feature on the south side. It's a pleasant feature, popular with many, used intermittently. It has a rubber liner on the bottom with a grout bottom covering it, and it's eroded or worn over time and needs repair. Next slide. There is landscape or plantings around, particularly on the north end of the pond, and also on the very south end, there is the memorial for Compassionate Friends. And it has a lot of plantings, things that have overgrown over time and need some attention. Next slide. So with those findings, we went to the public. It was May 19th. We held a public open forum here. We got approximately 20 people from city staff and from the public that attended that. We provided these findings and some options for people to consider for improvements or amenities that could be included in the park. And we had a handful of comments coming out of it. And those comments came from the public, included how popular the walking trails are in that park, how popular the pond feature is, and the water display it provides as a backdrop to people in the park and the people that use the walking trails, and that many or most are concerned with the water quality of the pond itself. Next slide. So with that feedback and with our findings, we tried to prepare a number of scenarios or alternatives for you to consider, try to make it fairly wide-ranging, and we ended up with 5 different scenarios to offer you. First of which is to keep the pond feature as it is, but reconstructing or improving it so that it can be maintained and it would extend the life of it. So that was our first option. Second is, what if the pond were removed altogether, acknowledging that it's a maintenance effort on the staff and it's creating a condition that some people find unpleasant. So what about the option of just taking the pond out altogether and make it a green space? Third option we provided was, we got a lot of comments about how people enjoyed the water feature aspect for the pond, but it's obviously attracting geese and things that are creating water quality hazard. So a third option was, what if we were to take the pond out altogether, but provide some kind of feature or amenity that would replace what people were getting from the pond. Fourth option was actually to keep the pond, but reduce it in size and scope, and then provide supplement that with some of these other features or amenities. And then the last option was reduce the pond in size and scale, and just reduce its scope and provide green space surrounding. So those were the 5 scenarios we presented, and we tried to cover kind of the basis anywhere from keep it as is to take it out entirely. So next slide, please. So I'll start first with option A. This really is intended to, again, to keep the pond as is, but to correct all the ills from it. So it included a lot of work in reconstructing the perimeter, reconstructing the sidewalk around it, great deal of attention and equipment to provide recirculation and filtration systems to clean the water or treat the water, but basically keep it as it is in its current character. So next slide, please. So again, there's a list: replacement of that sidewalk on the west, regrading the area on the west to keep water from eroding or moving towards the pond, reconstructing the pond walls, repairing, there's that stream feature, so this includes reconstructing and repairing that stream feature, and then the treatment system. So we've estimated with this a construction cost of about $816,000, and we added project costs, which includes those things that don't go in the construction contract, like design fees and testing, those things, for a total estimated or opinion of cost of about just a little over $900,000. Now with that, we've added treatment systems, filter systems to help keep the water clean, so we are providing systems that require maintenance and staff involvement. So we've estimated that this option would provide or would need an average about 10 hours per week for city staff to maintain. So there is an operational impact to this option.
Could I
Yes.
ask a real quick question,
Yes, ma'am.
Jeff? And and I think it applies to all the different concepts when we're looking at the operating projections. I mean, I'm assuming that the 13,000 that you referenced here, that includes putting money back to upgrade or to replace equipment as it fails, since if we're going to be having some pretty sophisticated filtration options, I mean, pumps
Yes.
give out, and,
That actually did not include the capital replacement costs
okay.
for equipment replacing filters or pumps
Okay,
over
so this
time.
is strictly.
This is strictly
labor.
just operating
Okay.
that. So, and that's a good point. If you would like me to go back and try to estimate or project some capital replacement on that, I can add those figures as well.
You know, I don't know if anybody else is interested in hearing about it, but to me, that, for the options that include a pond, that would be something that would be helpful for me to know, because I don't know if the average life expectancy of a pump or is, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or like what chemicals we're going to have to
Sure.
add to the pond, what exactly that would run. I
did-
don't know what the different filtration systems
Sure.
look like, so I don't.
It did include the cost to operate it, so it did include
Okay.
whatever chemical treatment, those
Okay.
costs, but did not include a capital replacement of equipment.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
that's certainly something I could go back and estimate that and
Cool.
provide
That, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, that would
Sure.
be helpful to know what we're going to need to be investing in that.
As a corollary to that, the filtration systems, is that using new equipment, or are we repurposing, the one idea surfaced about repurposing? some of the
I have a budget in that.
equipment?
That was an idea that was tossed around earlier, that you had equipment. So that equipment, those filters could be repurposed. At this point, I've included a budget that we could repurpose that equipment, or we could provide new equipment for that. So it's not definitive, I guess, that we picked a path for that, but we've simply provided a budget to provide that equipment.
And the filters we're talking about are repurposing the filters from the old swimming pool north of Tony's Pizza Event Center? correct?
Yes, that's correct.
The 1930s era filters, I mean, maybe we upgraded them in the 60s or 70s, but that's some pretty old equipment.
The filters had been upgraded shortly prior to
To
the
Kenwood
facility
Road.
being closed.
Okay.
So they're certainly not the 1930s, the old filters.
And do you feel confident that we can get the blue gene algae problem under control with the filtration systems that you're proposing at this point?
I think, well, I'm not going to guarantee that it would be crystal clean, but filtration system with the chemical treatment would oxidize that algae and allow it to be removed, and it would substantially improve the conditions that you have now.
Okay.
So, yes.
And, not that I'm a waterfowl fan, but the chemical treatments that we would be using would not be harmful to the waterfowl if they should still choose to come there. I mean, we're not going to see geese with losing feathers or.
We would not. We would
Feed.
not provide chemical treatment that would impact them. There are a couple of ways we could do that. One is we could provide algae control or algae-side chemicals that would not be detrimental
Okay.
to animals,
Okay.
fish or the ducks. But we could also provide chemical systems that allow it to oxidize and be filter removed and have it leave or have it dissipate prior to being put back into the pond. So those chemicals could be local to the treatment, the actual treatment action or where the filters are.
Thank you.
I've got a few questions that I can ask at any point, but if I got some answers, it might help me as you continue to go through the options, think about what
Sure.
makes sense, but and if you'd rather me wait and you can look up-
I'm at your beck and call, so however you would like, if you would like to ask questions now, that's great.
Okay, well, currently, I'll go ahead and ask them, I guess. Currently, we do or we don't have leaks with the bentonite? The bottom, I guess, is essentially what I'm asking about.
I know Jeff alluded to that. I knew that had been an issue at some point. I was thinking that some of that had been captured or repaired, so I'm not aware of current ongoing leaks that you have right now, but I could be mistaken.
Okay, so,
But that's certainly something we can follow up on. I know that has been an issue in the past, and there has been attention put on repairing that bentonite liner.
and do we know what kind of bentonite was used with that, whether it was calcium or sodium or?
I can go grab the manual. We have the original manual for the project.
Did Curtis Johnson do that?
Curtis Johnson Farms removed the dirt that staff, Curtis Johnson Farms put the bentonite down.
Chris, why don't you come to
Yeah,
the mic,
I was
please?
just,
I always think I'm loud enough for you to hear me, I'm sorry. I do believe that Johnson Farms removed the dirt and laid down the original bentonite. We did the concrete sacks, and then there were some original issues with the pond not holding water, and the Johnsons had to come back and add more bentonite or redo part of their work, but I don't know to what extent.
Do we know if that bentonite was actually mixed into the dirt, or was it just laid, or was it sheep's footed in, or what, how was the process on that?
I cannot answer that question entirely, although I do recall seeing some pictures with sheep's footprints in them, so I would assume that there was some of that compaction done with that method.
Okay. The walls, as they currently are with the concrete sacks, what is behind those what is behind the concrete?
Dirt.
How was that ever an expectation that that would not leak? Did they think the clay content was just enough to,
We don't know. We don't know.
so just stacked concrete that was?
The pictures that the pictures that I originally saw just showed staff literally, it was carved out and staff stacked them.
With, I remember the paper was still on them and everything, yeah.
And then, as Jeff alluded to, the west side, at one point in time, we had failure and that portion of the wall caved in. We had to be repaired and rebuilt. If you look at the steel supports that are in that west side, that's where they tried to tie it back into the existing ground.
Okay. Okay. What would the new walls be constructed of?
We haven't selected the exact wall detail yet, but it would be, we put a budget in, it could be a number of things. It could be a formed concrete wall. It could be a limestone stacked wall that's kind of a more natural appearance. In either case, we have budget in to recondition the backfill on that and provide, my intention would be to provide some liner or something on the back side of those walls to provide kind of that more water tightness.
Okay. Along with that, would there ever be a thought of adding, I mean, obviously with a public pond like that, you're not wanting a real deep, just kind of a public safety thing, but would there be any benefit to actually adding some depth to the pond or in the center of the pond to?
I think there would be benefit on that, and I haven't listed out that as an option specifically, but any reconstruction of the pond, I think it ought to consider deepening in the middle portion of that. As you alluded, it could be a public safety issue where you have deep water right at the perimeter, but I don't think there would be any reason why you couldn't have it shallow at the perimeter and put deep portions in the middle. And there would be benefit to that, benefit in terms of cooling temperatures or slowing down the growth of algae, and those kind of things. So absolutely, ought to be
Okay.
considered.
As all of this is being done, let's say it's drained, you're putting in a new wall, all of this construction and equipment is on there, and you puncture basically the seal that's created with the bentonite. How do you go back and you've got this pond bottom that takes some time to settle in, seal up, and now we've disturbed that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you would have to rework the bottom, recompact, and do that. So
Okay, so
Yes.
that'll all be redone as well.
yes.
Now, what are your thoughts on, I know they have like the geotextile large large liners for ponds much larger than that. What are your thoughts on that versus just bentonite?
I don't have a strong opinion on that. That's certainly something that I think as you implement it could be considered. So I don't have a thought or comparison. I think clearly, I think those certain EPDM liners, some of those liners would have a longer life and have be safer options, I guess, for protection from it leaking. So yeah, it definitely would be, that comparison ought to be made for during an implementation if the pond is being rebuilt.
Okay, okay. And then in terms of that filtration system, would it be some sort of a pump system that would be taking it from the stream or the south end and then also sort of sucking it into a weir or something like that to?
What I intend, the budget I have intends to move the water from one end of the pond to the other to keep it recirculating so there aren't stagnant areas or we're not short cycling it. My initial intention would be to take the water and push it from the south to the north following prevailing winds and provide some form of weir structure that would help skim off whatever debris or material that collects on the surface.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
No.
Keep
And
going.
in addition to that, I think we would intend to increase the aeration, provide better aeration or more aeration than what you have.
That is, yeah, that's a pretty small feature for that many gallons, I'm assuming.
Sure. And it's an inexpensive way to improve the water quality
Right.
for that pond. Absolutely.
What's our duty to maintain a standard in the water quality? Does that make sense? I mean, doesn't expect it to be potable, but how dirty can it be? And
well,
and what do you run against? I just don't have any.
What you're running against, I think, is discharges. If you get to the point where water's leaving the pond, and it become a point source of pollution, that's your regulatory obligation. Other than that, you're having the algae blooms that are happening in the pond, and you clearly want people not in the water or in contact with that. But I don't believe there are any regulatory requirements for that other than advising people to stay out, that the potential hazard exists and stay out of there. So most of the regulations I understand, or I believe in this case, are with the discharges in the vent.
So if we're recirculating it, there's a lot of latitude there about
There is.
how good and how bad it
There
would
is.
be, and it's monitored regularly, then it should be hard to manage.
I would agree with that. I think the focus would be to clean it up, to make it, it becomes an aesthetic thing at some point where the public looks at it and believes it's of good quality and it's not pea green color. So that's the primary focus. There is
Good enough that anybody wants to drink.
so I do believe there is latitude on the actual quality that you maintain of that water, assuming you're under the discharge regulatory limits. So with that, and that's a good point, is we have budget in for treatment systems or filter systems. And those are often found, you're managing those, your staff's managing systems like that for your water park. And in those cases, there are specific regulations that the water quality must be maintained at a certain level, and your systems are running 24 hours a day, which is a requirement. In a situation like this, you're trying to improve the water quality, and those systems could run 24 hours a day. They wouldn't have to. Maybe they're run just when conditions start to worsen and you spend some effort to try to clean it up and improve the water quality. So there is a fair amount of latitude on how you might operate or run those systems.
Thank you.
And since we are kind of focusing in on, since this is our first option and it's the one that keeps the pond intact, I've just got a couple more questions to ask. Any contemplation of adding any kind of native plants or anything to help aerate I may be getting literally off into the weeds at this point, but or I didn't know if we were just going to solely rely on more mechanical and chemical means for keeping the water circulating and looking good, or one of the comments we got, and I don't know how much expertise this person had, but it seemed like they did in terms of introducing like the native water plants and
Sure.
reeds and things like that. So I didn't know if that was going to be
Sure.
part of our,
There is, and
Plan.
I'll tell you where I am with this feasibility study is I haven't selected kind of the exact plan. This is the one way that you're going to treat the water from here on. What I've tried to do is prepare scenarios, alternatives to consider. So give a magnitude of cost to keep the pond or the water feature as is, adding budget in for significant systems to treat the water and make it, give your staff the tools to keep the water clean. I haven't selected those exact tools, so to speak, that you might use, but I have put budgets in there, and I did include, just from a budgeting standpoint, I did include line items for providing aeration systems and aquatic plants. So there is that,
Okay.
there is that option where rather than physical, mechanical systems and chemical systems that treat the water, leaning more towards improving an
passive.
ecosystem that kind of naturally allows the water to stay cleaner, and kind of inhibits that algae growth. So aquatic plants might be that, deeper water would be that, aeration would be that, and even selecting fish population that would help keep some of that clean as well. So those are all tools that are available to you. I haven't picked an exact method for that. What I'm trying to do is provide a budget that I think is reasonable to allow that to happen, if that makes sense.
it does, it very much does. My final question in regards to any of the options that include reconstruction of the pond, and this is, I think, more for staff, so I don't know if I should be looking at Rick Martin, or I don't know if I should be looking at Jeff or Chris, but given the state of our other parks that have water features, whether we're looking at Lakewood or whether we're looking at Sunset Park, currently, we're really, really, really struggling in Sunset Park to have anything that is operational and that looks nice. Do we have, is it a reasonable expectation that we have either the amount of staff that we need or the staff with sufficient expertise that can get the kind of maintenance done in 10 hours a week? Because, and this is not any criticism of our park staff, because I think that, I've been saying this for years, I think they're really overstretched. But if we're not taking care of Sunset Park, which is on a much smaller scale, and, Jerry Ivey pond has gotten to this point, what degree of confidence do we have that we have staff or have staff with the right expertise that can keep this up and going?
That's a good question. As everybody's aware, Rick is staff challenged right now. And it's not a fault of Rick, it's just the system. We do work with Martha to source out one of her employees that helps us with the water clarity at the water park. And one of the reasons for that is we don't have staff that are water experts,
Right.
if you will. So that's why utilizing Travis allows us to make sure that we don't have to close the water because of a chemical imbalance. It doesn't take very long at all for pool water to start to turn green with algae.
Yeah.
I would think that in this situation, with Lakewood, with Jerry Ivey and with Sunset, at some point in time, we look at either when a position goes, when somebody leaves a position, we look to somebody that might have some water treatment background, but I don't think it's a fair expectation to put it on Rick with his existing resources to keep that pond crystal clear.
No,
I don't think he can do it today, and again, that's not a fault of Rick or his staff, they just don't have that training or that background.
Right, and I totally agree. I just, I'd like to keep this as part of the mix, because last week we talked about adjusting our expectations, which I have no intention of ever adjusting my expectations of beautiful parks. But it's something that we do need to be cognizant of. So if we do need to be getting someone either within the Parks Department that has the expertise to deal with water, or if that's a position in utilities or public works or whatever, what I don't want to see is we build it and then we can't maintain it. And I think that was a pretty common thread among a lot of the comments that I read, is it's like, in this community, we have a tradition of building really wonderful facilities, wonderful parks, and then we consider our job done. So I'm just looking at it from a sustainability point of view, in terms of, especially in terms of staff, because that's what a lot of it comes down to, is having enough staff and adequately trained staff. So,
And I'm not saying at all that, if this is built properly with the proper maintenance procedures in place, mechanical systems, fish, plants, things that'll help keep the water clean, I'm not saying that it'll be an impossible task for staff. I mean, we'll still need to skim it, or we'll still need to get dead fish out of it, or there'll still be basic things. But a lot of the stuff that Jeff is describing will aid Rick's staff in that and make it easier. One of the reasons the pond is so green is because of all the things that Rick's been talking about for 5 years. People are feeding the geese. People are dumping 50-pound bags of corn out there. People are throwing trash into it.
Yep.
And again, Rick's staff simply can't keep up. And even when they do approach people about not dumping stuff there, they do it anyway. So I think some of these features that we put in place will help that a lot.
thank you. All right. And I'm so sorry to have interrupted you multiple
No,
times, Jeff.
no.
Please continue.
No, absolutely. I think we've done this one, right?
Yep.
So, all right, let's move on. Next slide. So next slide was basically answering the question of, again, we just talked about how much effort it is to maintain this or keep the water clean. So what if we just filled it in and made it an open field or open grass? So that's the option there. Next slide, please. So we have some costs there. For that, again, I was still replacing some of the infrastructure, the sidewalk, regrading some of the area, filling in the pond, and then converting say that stream to a dry creek bed. And then we had miscellaneous costs in there, site furnishings and things that went with this. And a good chunk of this this cost, probably half of the cost is actual filling in the pond, and part of that is we're assuming there's a fair amount of regulatory efforts that'll be done for this, dewatering it, such that the KDHE is okay with the discharge on that, as well as dealing with whatever sludge is on the bottom of it. So we have in the budget either dealing with disposal of that, certainly disposal of the water, but also either disposal of the sludge in the bottom, or I think actually in budget to line that and try to bury it in place without having to haul it off. So that's the budget for that. It's about a little over $500,000 by our opinion of cost. And again, that removes the operational efforts for that cost minus mowing the grass.
That just boggles my mind. It seems so expensive. Where do you take that stuff if you have to extract it?
Well, you have to land apply it in some manner. So the water itself, it could either be irrigated on a certain area, or it could be hauled in containers and sprayed somewhere. Those are typical options. But again, it adds a lot of effort and time and testing to do that. You can only apply so much on a certain area during certain times, so it extends that process and makes it more expensive. And again, I know that in general, these costs probably seem kind of high to you. Again, last couple of years have taught us that we believe construction costs have escalated quite a bit. So we're trying to factor in, the 15 to 30% escalation in costs that we've been seeing with these budgeting. And the hope is, again, these are budgets. The hope is that whatever path is picked, there's an established budget, and the project moving forward would be less than that budget, if that makes sense. Okay. Next slide. So this one is concept C. So concept C, so we did receive at least in the original open house, a fair amount of public comment about the walking trails and the effect that the pond and the water feature provides. And we were balancing that with the fact that it's open water attracting geese. So are there options there that provide that kind of feel or that kind of park setting, that benefit to your constituency, but eliminates the actual body of water that's causing problems? So this was our attempt to show this option. And in this, we basically left the gazebo in place. We've moved the memorial to be more centrally focused in that park area. And then we've provided a plaza space or area with some kind of water feature or water effect that replicates or provides that experience for your guests in that park. So that's the intention for this option. Next slide, please. So with that, of course, you know, we've taken a lot of assumptions on this. This option can grow or shrink a lot, but we've made some assumptions on that in terms of the scale and the kind of amenities that could be provided. And we've come up with a projected opinion of cost of just under $1 million for this one, $960-some thousand. And again, we do have, we're replacing pond systems. We do have some water features and some systems there. So we do have systems that require maintenance. And we've, again, estimated that it might take staff time, approximately 10 hours a week for operating that. And we've shown that as a operating budget.
Did you say a price for the water feature?
The water feature, I didn't give a specific price for it, but in the budget.
$200,000 thing, or?
So so just in general, about a little over $300,000 for kind of that spray plaza area is in the budget. And again, that's certainly something, if this is a concept that you like, it's certainly a concept that could shrink or grow.
Yeah.
But the point about this option is removing the water feature, but trying to provide that water feature or that benefit without the standing water. Thoughts or questions on that one? Nope. Okay. Next slide, please. So this one was concept D. Now, concept D has a blend of that. Actually, and so in concept D, it has a blend. We've taken the pond and reduced its scale and size, but we've also provided that kind of plaza area. And the intention or idea, again, is for this plaza area, it basically would be to replace or replicate what you're getting from the gazebo. The gazebo could be taken, moved somewhere else, or taken down, and that there would be a plaza area for events. It could be gatherings, could be events, public. Trying to think of just different activities and events that could occur around that plaza that might be occurring around the gazebo right now. So next slide, please. So with that, obviously, since we're building new amenities and we're also reconstructing a portion of the pond, this comes in as the most expensive option of those scenarios I've presented. And we have an opinion, a cost of roughly $1.5 million. And again, this is one like the previous option. If you like the concept, the scope or scale of that can shrink or grow based on those amenities that are being added. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I guess my question would be on concept D and E both, where we're reducing the size of the pond. Does that reduce our goose problem, or does it continue? Does that size of pond still continue to draw geese?
I think it clearly would continue to draw the geese. So I think your point you're about to make is you're probably not reducing the geese, we're reducing the water surface area, but I can't tell you that that's going to reduce the number of geese that want to drop in there, but it is reducing the capital cost of reconstructing or maintaining the physical structures of the pond. But we would still, in this option, we are reducing the level of, I guess, treatment of that. So the overall systems and the cost of that reduces. Okay, any other questions or thoughts on that one? Okay, next slide, please. So last one is if D or the previous one is we like the idea of reducing the pond, but adding the extra amenities is expensive and maybe not an option we want to do. What if we just reduced the size or scale of the pond, made it more manageable, but still having to deal with obviously the goose population and treating that water? But that's what this option does. So instead of all the additional amenities, that area becomes open green space. Next slide, please. And that reduces the cost. So down to, our opinion cost of this one is a little over $600,000. And we still have some of the pond systems to maintain, but we have reduced the size of that pond and the level of effort, we think, to operate those systems. So we've reduced the operating projection on that one.
I noticed that this concept does leave the gazebo. Does this include any upgrades to the gazebo? Or if not, do we have any idea what a dollar amount we would have to upgrade the gazebo as far as?
It may not be clear in what I've presented to you, but I intend that in this option that the gazebo would be repainted and the roof be replaced on it. So it does include a minimal amount of budget for.
And I haven't been on that gazebo in a long time. Is it structurally still sound as far as the flooring and everything,
I believe
railing?
it's structurally sound, the structure itself. So I think a lot of the focus on updating it, the basic updating would be repainting and recoating and repainting and the roof.
Was this the Oakdale gazebo?
Yes.
It was, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was built for the first river festival,
Yeah.
sat in the middle of the street. Then it was taken over to Kenwood, and then they moved it out to Jerry Ivey. So
There-
I have kind of sentimental attachment to it because of the
Yeah.
history in it.
Yeah.
Kind of sorry to see the picture of it being in the shape it's in. I kind of wonder if we haven't put off taking care of it because we've been worrying about this pond for a couple of years. But, yeah, it's something I like. Is there any reason to believe that in this concept, you couldn't go back and put a spray park in at some future time when the budget allowed that? That's pretty much the same concept as the
It
one
is.
prior without the water feature.
It is. It is that open green space area could be master planned or could be future amenities added, certainly.
You read my mind. That was my question as well. Being able to do it in stages.
Now, are you talking a spray park or a water feature? Because we have a spray park now, but a water feature's not, I take it a water feature's just to look at, it's not to actually be, or,
It could be that I haven't necessarily defined that. What I've shown you is fairly interactive. So it could be, the primary focus or purpose of it would be as a display to create the effect that people revere the pond for. So that's the primary purpose. What I've shown you is interactive, so it could be interactive and kids could play in it. But it's not necessarily there to replace, say, the spray pad that you have now
okay.
and those activities, but provide that aesthetic, but still be interactive for kids to play in.
This is a question more for staff. I mean, I'm drawn toward keeping a pond of some kind, but I still am really concerned about the waterfowl issue. Is is it like a specific person or a specific group of people that come and dump the 50-pound bags of corn? I mean, that's a pretty intense commitment to giving the man, whatever, but.
Good afternoon. Rick Martin, Park Superintendent. I'll try and answer some of those. It's geese like water, geese like green space. So anytime we have the combination of those two, especially lush green space, they're going to be attracted to it. As far as the people feeding, we've educated, we put signs up, we've had PD educate, and they continue to bring it and continue to dump it.
Yeah, to backstop that a little bit, we may have individuals that are more committed and maybe
Yeah.
more stubborn, but I've personally been involved with kind of the troubleshooting and trying to identify solutions as well as monitoring what's going on. And I think you have a cross-section of the community that takes children there and feeds the ducks bread and crackers, and as long as you have water, you're going to have geese, and I don't think you're going to be able to completely stop feeding the geese. Even if you do, I don't know that causes them to leave. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've kind of taken the if you can't beat them, join them approach that it's going to create a water quality problem, and we're going to have to treat the water quality.
Yeah, I think what adds to that whole thing is that directly to the east, there's private ponds and the river's there. So it's just kind of a natural attraction. And anytime we have ducks and geese that are domesticated, they kind of act as a call flock. So you have wild geese that are flying over, the domesticated geese that are there call to them, they come in. So that's why we see a lot of times fall, winter, early spring, that it's even more than what we have now. And the resident ducks and geese there they serve as a call flock to migratory birds. And then when you're feeding them 50 pounds a day or more, that just compounds all of it.
The actual issue with the geese isn't so, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's not so much a numbers thing. I mean, obviously they're going to crap sidewalk and stuff, but it's more, I mean, this is really more of a water quality issue from the number of geese more than it is, we got 1,000 geese and they're taking over a certain area.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of a lot of things. So we get a lot of runoff from up above, just like was stated, and that's causing some of the erosion, some of the sidewalks to fail. So you have that runoff coming from that. So we have nutrients from that. We have nutrients that come from streets and other sidewalks, regardless of what kind it is, whether it's gases, oils, different things. So it's a combination, I think, of all of those different nutrients that are supplied into that pond. It's not strictly just the geese. It's a number of different factors. We looked at and we talked about the money, the $64,000, but we looked at floating wetlands. That was kind of discussed as well, and that will help. What that does, it kind of shades the area so you don't have as much algae growth in the shade. It needs sunlight. He talked about deepening the pond. That will help. If it's deeper, there's more shade below. So a lot of those different factors, we kind of took that out, like Mike said, because kind of looking at where this is going to go in the future. And but those are still some options. Absolutely, the root system from the floating wetlands and water plants, they help absorb a lot of those nutrients. What you have to do is harvest all that plant, that vegetation at the end of the year so it doesn't die, fall back in the pond. Now you've compounded the whole situation.
Yeah, I think, in response to Commissioner Ryan's comment earlier, I don't think there's any expectation that we have crystal clear pond water out there, but surely with the filtration and the remediation efforts that we're talking about here, I would not have a concern about the geese affecting or deterring the quality of water from being aesthetically pleasing, unsafe. I think.
Yeah, I think it's going to help tremendously. But, if you look at if you reduce the size of the pond, we still have the same number of geese. That's compounded it as well.
Compounded yeah, and I still have a concern as much with the water quality because of geese as I do with the outskirts of the sidewalks and everything. To me, that's a health hazard for kids and people to be on as much as the water quality. And that's the only thing that concerns me about making the pond smaller is if you're still having the wildlife there, you're still going to have that same problem, so.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because, I mean, obviously, we don't have enough staff as it is, so it's not like we can,
Keep the sidewalks clean.
keep the sidewalks clean, and, yeah.
So bentonite clay is extremely expensive. Would we be getting that from, it only comes from a couple states, doesn't it? Wyoming or somewhere?
That I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so, I think for this kind of quantity, it would have to be trucked in. I think it has to come, it's not in Kansas,
Yeah.
unless it's held somewhere. But anyway,
So a liner, you're back to the liner.
yeah, I'm
being a
just going
good
back and
option.
forth between we have a bentonite clay bottom right now, and if we actually were, and a liner's not cheap either, for a good liner, but if we actually had a liner that came up behind those walls, just for extra security on top of a bentonite bottom, I was just trying to think of what the cost difference might be. I don't know, but.
Well, one thing that occurs to me, we haven't talked with Jeff about, I haven't even talked with park staff about, is we could take a design-build approach to this, where designers and contractors submit a design and a bid to us. You could serve in a role as helping us put those bids out in the first place and then vetting them when they're received. And that, maximizes, if a contractor specializes in a particular technique, maybe that maximizes the competitiveness of the bids. And if we're willing to be flexible, it might give them an opportunity to tell us a little bit about the footprint, if that impacts, how much liner they have available, or, and if we're trying to maintain a water feature but also do it on a budget, design bid build may dictate costs where design build might bring some creativity into it.
True.
What I might suggest, if there's a commitment to the pond and keeping it and moving forward, there might be some additional tests that could be done to help kind of figure out the answer to your questions. So certainly, one of the things that hasn't been done to date is trying to sample the water to see how bad the water is, or to establish and see how thick the sludge is in the bottom and what's in there. So a geotech engineer could be engaged by the city to sample those two things and then do some borings to determine. So beyond the bentonite clay layer, what are the soils underneath it? Are the soils underneath it a fatty clay soil, which then has its own properties for sealing it off, so the bentonite clay is not as important, or is that liner really important based on the geology? So that might be I would suggest, if moving forward with the pond is an option, that there might be some additional testing that should be done before you go into an implementation phase. Okay. All right. So how much time do we have? I guess, are we running out of time?
We have until about 5 till 4, so we've got another 25 minutes.
Okay, great. Next slide. So here, this slide just lays out all the options side by side, so you can see comparative opinion of cost based on the assumptions we made, along with the operation, the impact on your operating staff. So you can see that, so removing the pond is the lesser cost option. Building the combination of the pond plus the plaza is the more expensive option, with the other ones in between. Okay, next slide. So we did take these options. So these 5 options, we put them on a web forum, put it out to the public to get feedback from them, allow the citizens to prioritize or rank the options they thought, given the given the options, given the costs, given the operating projections. So that was put out there. Of course, I fully recognize that the public doesn't understand the cost of things. So I would say that our experience, the public assumes that the city has the money to do whatever. So I do know that inherently is built into the responses, so.
Right, but the costs and the projected maintenance costs were included.
They were
So
included.
people were at least aware.
They were aware of the dollar amount for each option, so yes. So with that, there were 547 responses or surveys on the web. And this is, first part is a breakdown of the age. We did ask the age of each person that did the survey. And that I believe the majority of those were between the ages of, 55% of the respondents were between the age of 25 to 44. So that was the highest demographic that did the survey. Next slide. 99% of the respondents said that they had been to Jerry Ivey Park in the last 5 years. 78% said that they would visit the park again if the improvements were made, and 93% of the respondents said they support improvements. So since this is a web format, this was clearly not a statistically valid citywide survey done. It was put on the web, so I would expect it attracted a lot of attention from those who support or are partial to Jerry Ivey Park. So those were the respondents. Next slide, please. And this is how we asked them to rank their favorite, number 1 through 5. And because of that ranking, number 1's a low score, so the lower, actually, well, I take that back. Actually, we factor that. So the higher score here is the highest ranked option. So the number 1 ranked option from the public is to keep the pond in its current configuration, followed by the option that had the smaller version of the pond plus all the additional amenities. That was the second rated option. And then the third rated option was to keep the pond with the green space, reducing the pond size and green space. So clearly, those that filled out the survey online were in favor of having the pond in some shape or form.
It's good to know cost is no.
Cost is no object, I know.
And again, I do say that, I do say that as just an outsider's opinion, that, and I do think there inherently, and anytime we do a survey like this, I think most people believe the city has money to do this. So if you just make the right decisions and use the money we have on this instead of something else, they're happy. So I do recognize that, not saying that's right or wrong, and I recognize the hard position you're in, having to balance all the expenditures out there and having to decide where it's most wise to spend the city's dollars.
And usually when you have people come to this, they have more of a vested interest. So that's 500 people out of 47,000. So you don't know, yeah.
I suppose you could have had an anti-group that tried to provide feedback in social media, but that'd kind of be the exception on a project like this, I would think.
So I think that was it for questions on this or thoughts.
I guess.
Oh,
my-
there were written comments. There were a lot of written comments.
Yeah.
You know, the majority of them certainly want the pond and want the gazebo and don't want to lose that. So those were a lot of the written comments.
All right, so I guess what staff is going to be looking at from us today is some sort of a consensus or some feedback on where the governing body sees this going and what you all think of what we've been presented with so far. So I'm.
You would guess correctly.
I'm looking down the line here, and I'm not getting any takers.
If you want my 2 cents first.
Yes, please.
I mean, the pond is important to a lot of people, and the gazebo is as well. I know we're struggling to find budget for all of the things that, I mean, we've realized that people are very fond of their parks, and that puts a lot of pressure on us to find the finances for that. But the fact of the matter is, if the state's trying to cap our revenues for property taxes, it's a little bit difficult to spend big money on any of these projects. So to me, number D, keeping the pond and hoping that while we're reconstructing that pond, we can chase off the homeless geeses and ducks that are there, and maybe reduce that population and manage it better. And that one, or number E is what I'm talking about doing.
Okay.
It gives you the option to put in a water feature later, but we preserve the park, pond in some form, and the gazebo as well. So, and it's also towards the bottom of the expense of the list.
Well, and your annual operating is half of what it is if you do the larger pond also. And I think the smaller ponds would be more manageable than the large pond on a long-term scale as far as being able to circulate the water and continue. Because it does seem, and again, we may be able to put the circulation in we need to keep a larger pond, keep the blue-green algae out, but I just think a smaller pond would make it much more manageable for park staff.
Okay, so I'm getting team gazebo and team pond here. What,
I guess. I still have troubles with the geese.
I do too.
And the area around. I almost like the water feature better, but that's my own personal feeling. But I guess if you go with what the public has stated, they want the pond, and I guess.
I'm,
So-
number one, concept A is where I'm at.
okay,
I don't think once the correct equipment is actually there, it's just a matter of, it's just a kind of, it's just scaled up or down. It's reducing the size isn't going to necessarily make it easier, I don't think. And in fact, I think it does probably increase our chances of having higher concentrations of all this into a kind of crammed into a smaller space. Once the pump and filtration system are set up and operable, whether it's a smaller pond or a larger pond, it's largely going to be the same in terms of staff's time to service it or check operations on it, I assume. I don't know. I like the open, larger body of water. I think adding depth and all the different things we've talked about here would certainly help. I mean, this is a homemade this is a homemade pond that is served, I guess, pretty well for the number of years, like you said, Jeff. But this would be a much more sophisticated operation that really should clean up the issues we're talking about.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Jeff, but how difficult or impractical would it be to bid a small pond footprint and a larger pond footprint to get to Commissioner Peck's point of quantifying that cost difference for that larger footprint?
That's a good question. I might have to think about it. Certainly could design either option. Design one as a base. I guess you could design the full pond as a base option and then have supplemental pages in the design for the reduced size. So you could bid it as a base option with a supplemental alternate bid. You're designing it probably twice by doing that, but it's design effort to get those actual bid prices. Or the other option is, you talked about different delivery methods. I think that'd be a challenge for a design build approach to say one or the other, but perhaps like a construction management process, if you've done that, you could have a construction manager on board and then you could have the two options and they could dial up the construction costs for each option before you get to the construction document level. So that's another option as well. It will cost you money, construction manager would cost you money in the design end.
Right.
That probably may negate whatever savings you get for construction, the actual construction activities. So,
Hey, Commissioners, did you understand where I was trying to go with that? That Commissioner Peck may be right, that mobilization and the base investment may be the bulk of the cost, and it's just hard to quantify that at this point. Where-
To have the bigger pond, you would have additional pumps, I'm taking it, and costs
have
ongoing.
the systems would be
Electrical.
larger, yes. So
Right.
the infrastructure would be larger for the larger pond. So certainly the systems, capital costs would be more, and the equipment would be larger, dealing with a larger volume. So you do have that. To Commissioner Peck's comment, his concern is that if you have the same influx of contaminants, same geese population, but you have a smaller volume of pond water, so to speak, then you're losing perhaps some of the effects of dilution having a larger body. And I can't tell you definitively one way or another if that would be the case, but I think those are the two kind of pros and cons.
One other comment I would make on that, and these are merely observations. I've got a large backyard pond and I've got a farm pond, and I've had to mess with this stuff on a much smaller scale with both. But in my farm pond, I observe that when we have good Kansas windy days, there's a lot of water movement, and scum and stuff is pushed to the edges, and that water has ripples going across it. It's probably to some level more oxygenated, or whatever word that would be. And I'm just thinking that a reduced size, you wouldn't have the mass or the surface area to take advantage of that. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I'm just,
I don't own a pond, so you're way ahead of me, but.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
So I might go back to one last comment from Mr. Schrag is that the other option is if you move forward with a traditional process design, like the design bidding process, you could really dial in on the design development phase of those two options as well, and kind of focus attention on design development of those two options and what the actual design would be and the treatments systems would be, and then do a good cost estimating exercise, perhaps with a cost estimator or contractor that's involved that process. So you could do that and then get pretty good cost estimates more dialed in for each of those options before you move into kind of that final construction document phase. So there is that option as well.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, Jeff. Any more questions for Jeff at this point? We do have a couple members of the public present, and I thought I might see if there are any questions or comments from members of the public before we continue our deliberations. Thank you very
Just
much.
to clarify for my benefit, Commissioner Hoppeck, you were leaning towards option E, or?
Yeah, I think so. Just,
I don't want to.
yeah.
I don't want to push you into a conclusion. When we talk about
I
ponds,
still have
we
an
had
issue
two
with the
pond options.
pond just from an ongoing geese problem. But that's, I think there's the public that kind of wants that. And so,
I did want to point out that as far as the dock goes, what we have removed actually is the seating that we had an issue with. We haven't removed the dock itself per se until we knew more direction from where you all wanted us to go with it. But we have removed part of it, but not the entire thing.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public here that would like to comment or ask questions specifically on the Jerry Ivey Pond?
Bill Longbine, Salina. One thing that's puzzled me is 3 blocks away is the water feature at Eagle Crest Retirement. They don't have this problem with the geese or the algae. Is it because there's no one feeding them?
It could be that they have a lot better aeration system. The aerator that we have there is.
Oh, you might.
There, come up.
you
Yep,
need to come up.
Sorry.
That'll teach you to try to sit in the back row and not be.
They do have a geese problem, though, I can tell you from being over there. Their sidewalks have a goose problem. Yeah. I don't know
And
about the
I don't know
water
their whole
quality.
operation over there, but my guess is that, just driving by it as well, that they have much bigger aerator than we have. The aerator we have, it basically collects from the surface, so it doesn't go down deep, so it's really not circulating that water. It's just drawing water off the surface, putting it up in the air, and laying it back down. So if you notice, sometimes you go by and the fountain's not running, it's because we have a really windy day, and that wind goes, like we said, from the south to the north. Well, what's on the north side? Our splash pad. So we try and reduce the effect of some of that airborne blue-green algae getting over there. So we shut it down on those really windy
golly.
days. And it's just like the waterfall feature. It works, but again, we shut it down because of blue-green algae. People like to take their pets over, get them a little drink of water, and all that does the same thing. It's just recirculating water from the pond around and down through that stream. So we shut it off as a safety precaution there too. But as far as Eagle Crest, I couldn't tell you what kind of system they have, to be honest with you.
And just looking at aerial photography, the water footprint looks smaller at Eagle Crest, but I wouldn't hazard a guess as to.
Yeah, it's
how
much smaller. And the other thing puzzles me, down where my son lives in West Wichita and his subdivision, there's water features everywhere. There's geese everywhere, and they don't have this problem. And I guess my concern is something has to be done just for the safety and health reasons. And I would vote with Commissioner Hoppick on option E, which seemed to be the most kind of economical, practical, and still maintain the water feature. But yeah, the geese thing is, that's a tough one for the,
I bet those other ponds are, at their deepest, probably more than 3 feet too.
yeah. How deep is the pond?
3 feet.
That's all?
That's extreme. I mean, my backyard pond is deeper than 3 feet.
Huh.
That's really
So maybe
shallow for
maybe that's
water
part of it.
temperatures.
And to go down a different path, do we have any liability, I mean,
Thank you,
what's
Mr.
our,
Longvine.
yeah, what's our liability if we get that pond too deep? I mean, because I know when you get in, 3 foot's not a problem, but if somebody would get in that and get into a deeper area, is that a concern? I mean, do our insurance companies ever, is that a question on a?
To my knowledge, it's never been a part of our risk assessment, a concern that they raised. I am speculating, but I think there's kind of a common acceptance that water features are a park amenity that people have to be
Navigate it
safe
around.
around and navigate
Even-
around.
You know, even in that large of a pond, even if we had 15 feet on the side that was 3 feet, even if you were able to go in to the middle, even in sections, and have that depth there, that's going to naturally help cool that overall body of water for sure, and provide more shade. But
What I'm hearing is that a new pond, the issue would be a management issue, both in how we construct it, how we take care of it. If it's going to be a smaller size, I think we're going to be able to handle the wildlife if we handle it properly.
Okay.
Did you have any other public comment? Is there anyone online?
Is there anyone else who would like to comment either virtually or in person on the Jerry Ivey Pond discussion? Okay.
Mayor Hodges, you haven't given us your opinion.
Well,
Not,
okay, no, because my opinion is based solely on the personnel that we have in place to manage this. And for that reason, I would be on team remove the pond and repurpose it into green space. We are, my concern is our parks across the board are falling so far behind on maintenance. And like I said, this is not a dig at park staff whatsoever. We're short-staffed. We're not getting staffed up to where we need to be, but I would I would be for concept B, the least popular and the least fun option, but it does maintain the gazebo, which I think the gazebo is important. But, so I don't know that that really advances our conversation a whole lot, because what I'm hearing from the other three is that a pond of some type is still important. And I think,
to the community.
and to the community.
Community, I
And
guess I would say.
I just, you know, a lot of these comments that we got from people concerned about, you know, we're concerned about, you know, if we put something in, we have to be able to maintain it. We have to be able to maintain it. And if there's no great difference between a small pond and maintaining something close to the existing footprint, it really doesn't matter to me either way. So whether we go with concept A or concept E to maintain a pond, or if we go completely no fun and go with concept B, you know, I see the merits of just keeping the pond on a bigger scale, just from the point of view, just from what Commissioner Peck mentioned in terms of we're still going to need to have most of the same equipment. If Jeff can give us maybe a cost differential between, you know, as we were discussing, a big pond versus a reduced pond. I mean, so at any rate, it sounds to me like we're moving toward
sounds like a
a
two and a
pond
one
and
and
the
a half. We're
gazebo.
gonna
Pond and a
get
gazebo. The
Commissioner
only
Davis.
question is whether we go with a bigger, maintain the existing footprint, or go with a reduced footprint. So in terms of helping us find our way forward from that point on, do we just want to go ahead and come to a decision today, or would we prefer to get further information back about costs of a larger pond versus a smaller pond? Because we do have the cost estimates. I mean, you know, right here in front of us.
I think an answer to Commissioner Peck's, concern would be valid about the, you know, would it be easier or harder to keep it
Clean,
clean?
right.
I mean, I have no idea. To me, it seemed like it'd be easier, but I understand that concept, and I'd like to know that, I guess.
So I'll throw this out there. I think yeah, I agree with your assessment of kind of where the community consensus is and where your consensus as a body is at the moment. So I think my intended approach would be that we'll play out the possibility of both a little bit further. We'll play out design and delivery methods and see whether that helps and identify cost savings or options for your consideration. But what I've heard is a pond in some sort, that the community likes the water feature and wants it retained. You as a governing body are trying to balance cost and that community desire, but there's an expectation of some type of water feature. And as staff, we'll see if we can sharpen that pencil a little bit in terms of design, cost estimating, delivery method, and come back to you before we go out to bid and anything final, come back to you and say, here's what we've been able to refine and get some direction from you to put
So,
something out to bid.
yeah, I think so, A or E, and with maybe an added component on our ability to maintain either one.
Right.
If it's, if we have the capabilities, if one is more difficult or more easily maintained than the other, what, you know, the burden it places on our staff, as well as capital improvement costs, developing some sort of a sinking fund. What are we going to need to be putting back for pump replacements?
Understood. Trying to refine the number, be as cost effective on the front end, and be mindful of operation and maintenance costs in the long term.
Yeah.
I would also add, if we, whether it's A or E, Jeff had talked about maybe a concrete sort of stem wall or something, or rock. And I think Sunset is, although it's practical, I think it has a real artificial
Oh, God, yeah.
feel. And anything that would be natural, but I also know I believe there's types of stone that you probably shouldn't have in ponds, and so obviously doing some due diligence there, but something natural, I think, would be the direction I'd want to see us head on that. One last question. with a weir system on the size of pond that it currently is, what does that look like? Is that housed in a building? Is that got a big grate on the ground, or what does that look like?
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
I haven't worked through that detail completely, but I imagine that is basically a lip or something where stuff's kind of is flowing over that and carrying the debris, and then an extended or large screen structure that then staff can walk by and kind of rake it up and dispose of it.
Okay.
I don't picture that as being housed anywhere. I would imagine that to try to be screened or hidden. Clearly, you don't want that out in the middle of everything where everybody sees all the debris collected, but something fairly simple where it just simply collects and your staff can rake it up and dispose of it. But that would add a lot of benefit to the water quality and to the surface, but again, that's another item that then requires staff to manage.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate all the work that you've done on this, and thanks to all the citizens who took the survey and shared their thoughts. I can assure you, we've read through all the comments, and we're taking those to heart. And with that, I think that we'll take maybe a quick recess until we reconvene here at 4. Thank you all very much. All right. It looks like we're live and we're ready to go with the Monday, September 27th, 2021 Salina City Commission meeting. Before we have the roll call, I'd like to confirm that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we'll proceed with roll call.
Mayor Hodges,
Here.
Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Peck,
Here?
Commissioner Ryan.
Aye. Here.
Would all who are able please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, I am looking at Mr. Scragg here. You had mentioned that we had some supplementary materials. Do you want to discuss that now? Or would you like to go
Sure.
into that after we have Citizens Forum?
Now's as good a time as any. We kind of have an unprecedented number of corrections and revisions, and so just wanted to walk you through them, Commissioners, so you're aware of them from the outset, and then we'll kind of respond to each one as it comes along. But as it relates to item 5.1, and the things at your desk should be in the order of the agenda. As it relates to item 5.1, we have a suggested revision to the wording of the development, or the performance agreement. So that's the first item that's in that packet with the highlighted yellow narrative. So just want to make you aware of that. We'll cover it in greater detail when we get to that item. The item 6.1, approval of the minutes. You should have seen an email that pointed out we had some Chinese font that showed up in the printout of that was distributed, so you have a corrected set of minutes without the Chinese font. The next item is 6.2, which is also on the consent agenda. There's no document that goes with it, but that staff recommendation is to not award that bid and put it back out to bid. So if you're inclined to follow staff's recommendation, I would suggest that you take that off the consent agenda and we can discuss that rather than relying on the consent agenda only to do that. The next item is item 7.1 that references a resolution number 197989 in the agenda when the correct reference is 217989. So you have a revised staff report that highlights that change. And then lastly, the Cedar Ridge item 7.3, there's a reference in the staff report to 25 existing homes being on the market, and when that's not correct, there are no homes in that price range on the market. And so you have a excerpt of page 8 from that staff report with the correction highlighted in yellow. We can discuss that in greater detail when we get to that item as well. But so you should have, there's 5 items that I wanted to call to your attention, and you should have 4 documents there that in support of those. So as we get to each one, we can go into it in greater detail, but wanted to explain why you had so many items at your dais today.
Thank you. And as someone who promptly looked through them and didn't put them back in the correct order, I'm sure that I'm going to need to make
can
sure
run
that
through
I'm
that
getting the
quickly.
right thing with the right supplement with the right agenda item.
There's a document with a lot of highlights about the covenants
Right.
of the company. That'd be number
5.1.
1.
Right.
The 6.1, the agenda would be the second item. The resolution 217989 would be the third item.
Yep.
And then page 8 of a staff report from the Public Works Department with the number 0 highlighted would be the last item.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Okay, we don't have any awards and proclamations today, so we will proceed to Citizens Forum. Citizens Forum is an opportunity for any member of the public to speak on an item that does not appear on today's agenda. We would ask that you identify yourself by your first and last name, let us know where you're from, and keep your remarks to 3 minutes. So with that, I will open it up to any citizens who are here physically to speak, and then we'll take a look at the online participants to see if there's anyone that wants to participate virtually. All right, going once, going twice. All right, we'll look at the online participants. If you would like to speak at Citizens Forum, please raise your hand. Click the raise hand icon, and Mr. Gardner will get you unmuted. And I'm not seeing any takers on that either. So that brings us to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, public hearing regarding issuance of taxable multifamily housing revenue bonds.
All right, with this, we will go ahead and open the public hearing, and I will turn it over to Lauren Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Commissioners. This item is regarding a proposed residential multifamily development, commonly referred to as Magnolia Point. The project encompasses 10.68 acres at the southwest corner of Interstate 135 and Magnolia Road, north of Menards and east of the Fairfield Inn. The address is approximately 800 Virginia Court. This site is within city limits and is zoned C5. The Planning Commission recently acted on this and approved a conditional use permit that would allow multifamily development at the site. This property does have access to public water and public sewer, but they have not been extended inside to the property. That would be part of the project. No permit or road fees or other special assessments apply to this property, and the site is not within a floodplain or a floodway. Inside your packet, you will find renderings and drawings that would depict the project's overall look, which contains a clubhouse with an outdoor pool, and then 6 three-story apartment buildings, each containing 28 dwellings. Parking-wise, there are 8 fully enclosed parking spaces that are inside each of the buildings, and then in addition to that, there's parking all around the development, and then some additional enclosed parking spaces. The plan shows fully enclosed 96 parking spots, and then an additional 192 that are open, for a total of 288 total parking spaces. This project is being constructed by Perry Reed Construction. They're an established full-service multifamily developer throughout the Midwest, and they currently own and are managing Chapel Ridge Apartments and the Reserve at Prairie Glen. Those are pretty new acquisitions for them that they're reinvesting in as well here in Salina. So on May 3rd, 2021, the City Commission acted and adopted Resolution 217954, making certain findings and determinations about the need for housing within the city of Salina and recommending the formation of an RHID district. That was for this property. Since that time, they have looked at a different financing structure and changed their request to an IRB. For the record, that RHID district was approved, but with this new economic incentive and change in financing, we're here in front of you today asking for an IRB. The commission has been notified about this through various conversations as we've been regarding housing and the need for housing in our community. So pursuant to that action taken on May 5th, 2021 regarding the RHID, staff and the developer have worked with bond counsel to meet all the requirements of an industrial revenue bond, which includes proper notification both to USD 305 and to the county, and doing those proper notifications. Part of this evening's meeting is the opening and closing of the public hearing, and then following that, Resolution 217991 has been provided, which authorizes proceeding with the project and the issuance of industrial revenue bonds, as well as authorization and execution of the attached agreement. And there is a performance agreement related to this, similar to what we've talked about with RHIDs. Those things that you identified in your housing study earlier this year, the Live Salina Plan update, and your housing incentive policy that you adopted in July, those issues such as how fast the development is coming along, the types of units and the price points have all been identified and are part of that performance agreement, which is a little different. This is also the first time we've ever done a residential IRB, industrial revenue bond. So those things have been specifically highlighted, and you'll see those in future IRBs if you choose to do one. You'll notice in the packet that this project has a minimum number of units. For the one-bedrooms, there are 96 units, an anticipated monthly lease rate of $900, with a minimum finished square feet of 850. There are 66 two-bedroom units with anticipated monthly lease rate of $1,100, with minimum finished square footage of 1,000 square feet. And then a three-bedroom unit, there are 6 of those, with a monthly lease rate of $1,325, with 1,200 square feet of finished space. This project will commence construction April 1st of 2022 and complete construction and commence tenant leases by October 1 of 2023. They will be leasing as buildings come online, so hopefully we'll be seeing that sooner rather than later. Their projected time would be February of 2022. This project did come forward prior to the adoption of your housing policy, and one of the things that the body had noted was both this project and the RHID request for Ryan Edition did not necessarily need to comply to the policy since they came before that, but you had instructed staff to kind of run it through the system for informational purposes to understand how it would have fit in if it had come after that. So the table has been provided, and remember in that policy there's kind of a base kind of first door to walk through is, do you even qualify for housing incentives? And that has to do with the number of units you're doing and how quickly you do those units, or I should say how quickly they're completed. So for an IRB in the policy, you have to do at least 50 units if you're not in a neighborhood revitalization area. This project accomplishes that. And you need to be operational within 3 years as required. This project will also do that. Then the other part, that second door you walk through for the policy, is the criteria table, desired criteria. And each one of those items has a weighted score. And so if a project ticks that item off, it accumulates that many points, which are then totaled up. If a project scores 8 or more points, it is recommended for the full 10-year, 100% of that IRB term. If it's less than that, there are other options. But in this case, this project does score 9 points, so it would be the recommended full 10-year exemption at 100%, which is also what they requested. Fiscal note, there's no direct fiscal costs associated with this action item. The city's issuance expenses are covered or will be reimbursed, I should say, and Perry Reconstruction will purchase the industrial revenue bonds. As I mentioned, this is a request for 100% abatement of property tax at 10 years of all taxes levied by all applicable taxing entities, as well as sales tax exemption for applicable construction materials associated with this development. So to just kind of knock that home, in IRB you have 2 options, and you can use both of them. It's both the property tax side of the abatement and then also the sales tax, and that's for purchasing construction materials. Both are being requested here. Madam Mayor, as you said, we have opened the public hearing. You'll also find in the packet Resolution 217991. As Mr. Scragg had mentioned, part of that would be a performance agreement. And staff is recommending that there be an amendment to the performance agreement. The supplemental materials you've been provided say staff recommends the current provisions of the draft performance agreement regarding the proportional allocation of payments in the event of a default be removed, resulting in partial compliance being deemed an event of default, disqualifying the developer from being eligible for property tax abatement. That sounds very wordy, but basically we had been going back and forth about whether there was a payment in lieu of taxes scenario that worked out better, or if it was simply easier to just basically deem the IRB disqualified in this case. And after going back and forth, it's very hard to kind of find the right number for the pilot to be accurately acted on, depending on what that is. So everybody came to the agreement, and it's our recommendation that actually like the only outcome of that is disqualification of the IRB, which is similar to the response above in 3.4. You have in front of you too, also making it easy to see, is those 2, basically it's like a page and a half of text specifically from that with the red line corrections that would show how that would affect the performance agreement. If the body chooses to move forward on Resolution 21-7991. Staff recommends option 1, which is approval of Resolution 21-7991. Other options for the body to choose from are making amendments that the City Commission deems appropriate to Resolution 21-7991, or postponing consideration of Resolution 21-7991 to a specified date and time, and provide staff direction regarding additional information or amendments the commission would like to see, or 4 is to vote to deny Resolution 21-7991 and provide additional direction on staff on how you would like to proceed on this. I would also like to add that Sarah Steele from Gilmore and Bell, who is our bond counsel on this item, is available via Zoom. And Tom Houston with Perry Reed is also available, who is the developer of this project, and would be happy to speak for a few moments a little bit about Perry Reed and give the commission any background. And then, of course, finishing that, all 3 of us are available for questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Driscoll. Just in terms of the identified options for the commission, if we're going to be amending the performance agreement, would that take us to option number 2, approving the resolution with the amendment as stated in the highlighted addendum?
I
Or does
believe-
it need to, or does it need to be acted upon separately?
I would look to Mr. Bankston.
And Mr. Bankston, as usual, quickly looks to bond counsel. Ms. Steele, do you have a thought as to how you would wish the amendment to be addressed?
Yes, thank you. I believe that you could adopt number 2 option that would amend the performance agreement in conjunction with the adoption of the resolution.
Thank you very much, Ms. Steele, appreciate it. All right, if Mr. Houston is here and would like to speak?
Certainly. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the commission. My name is Tom Houston. My address is 9200 Andermatt Drive in Lincoln, Nebraska. Appearing before you this afternoon on behalf of APR Salina, which is a company we have formed to undertake this project in Salina. I serve as general counsel for Perry Reed Properties based in Lincoln, Nebraska. Perry Reed Properties manages, develops, and owns projects generally in the Midwest area, multifamily projects primarily. Really got the start in affordable housing, but that's such a scarce resource, working with the low-income housing tax credit tools that are available. We also develop market rate housing, and this is a market rate housing project that we're looking at here. We develop in Nebraska and Iowa and Kansas, Missouri, Colorado, and we have 2 existing projects as noted here in Salina, the reserves at Prairie Glen that consists of 48 really townhome type of units, and then 296 units that comprise the ridge at Ridge of Salina down off Magnolia Street. We're currently under construction in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, North Platte and Papillion, Nebraska, and Grand Junction, Colorado. The item in front of you is really for the IRB, and we had really intended to improve or pursue the improvement district, but based upon the conversations that we had with Gilmore and Bell, we thought that the IRB was more streamlined, more efficient tool for this development, and that is what is on your agenda. What we propose here is the 168-unit multifamily property. We have built these buildings in other markets, and we're familiar with the property. We call it the big house concept, where it has 8 units, 8 parking garages that are included within the building that are really secured for those particular units, and has been very popular in the other markets that we're looking at and have developed it in. This site, we're really excited about this site. We think there's a lot of commercial activity down along Magnolia. The location of this site, in conjunction with the university campus and the airport and all the commercial development, and the fact that it's in the city limits and has access to city services, we think it's a prime target for a multifamily property. The IRB that's in front of you is really utilizing a number not to exceed $30 million. I have to advise you, we have not finished our design. We have not finished the engineering. We do not have pricing, but I can tell you this, our experience, even during the COVID time, we expect this kind of product to come in at a cost of approximately $145,000, $150,000 per unit. And that's why we came up with the $30 million IRB request. The IRB request would carry with it the sales tax exemption and then the real property tax abatement for the 10-year period. I agree with the terms of the performance agreement. We worked that over the last few days, and I agree with the proposed amendment to Section 3.05 and the elimination of subsection C. Just a little bit to tell you, it would be the desire of the ownership to really start construction as soon as possible, in November if possible. That's probably not going to happen because we don't have the engineering done, so we have to get the engineering completed. And if we have the opportunity with the mild winter, we will start during the winter, but we're really targeting April 1 as kind of a last date by which we would get started with construction. And the way these, since we are building six multifamily buildings with a clubhouse, once the first building comes online, which we would anticipate in February of 2023, we'll start the lease up. And we're building this product right now in Papillion, Nebraska, and the first building's just coming online. We're having ribbon cutting next month. The other buildings will trail behind it by a month or 2 or 3. But I anticipate that's how we would stage and really ramp up the lease up for this project here in Salina. What we've experienced in working in the Midwest is that housing really drives economic development. We have understood in all the markets in which we're developing that there is an urgent need for housing, and we really like the market of Salina. We really like the performance of the other properties that we have here. Occupancy is maintained high, and it's a really good place for our type of product, and we'd like to make further investment in the community. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Houston?
Quick question. You have 8, I call it enclosed parking spots per
Yeah.
building. Is there an additional cost per?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
those units are at a higher rate because they do have secured parking for those units.
But is that included in these, or is it an addition to what you're showing here for the rentals?
I think that's in addition to what I think
Okay.
the rate that we put in the performance agreement was the basic rate for the
1, 2,
units
and 3.
Yeah, the units that are in each structure, 28 units per structure.
Right. And I just wanted to verify with staff that as each building is completed, we're going to allow them to lease and those to be occupied.
Yeah, as long as the infrastructure is complete, and because we're not doing a subdivision, we can do a more
Okay.
kind of stage set of infrastructure
Because I
development.
think that's important because we have jobs coming in starting in 2022, so
Yeah.
we don't want to wait for the full
Yeah.
project to be completed before we.
The construction
begin leasing.
managers will really properly stage, and they'll start the right building at the right time, and to make sure that the future construction does not interfere with the occupancy of the first
Right.
building or two.
Okay.
Are the current projects or the finished projects you just spoke of, are those all coming in? It looks like they're slightly above $1 a square foot. Is that what you're seeing?
Those existing projects, both the Ridge and Prairie Glen, really, we started out as low-income housing tax credit projects, so they are at a lower rent. But
I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I meant, I thought you had alluded to some projects in Nebraska. That you had,
correct.
That's a different market, I know, but
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah, generally, we see the rents coming in. It's approximately $1 to $1.10 per square foot we see on a monthly basis for the rent is what we see.
Okay.
And I would expect these rents to be similar to that based upon the cost of construction.
Now, we gave a weighting of a 2 there to 50% or more of the units with rent below $1 a square foot.
That's what it would, but there's no points awarded if you go to the far right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
I made that same mistake. I thought.
When I was looking at the chart too, I was looking at the density, and the density of this product comes in at 15.7 odd units per acre. It's real close to the 16 dwelling units per acre. We looked at the possibility of including another 28-unit building. We decided that was too dense, so we backed away from it.
Any other questions for Mr. Houston? If not, I did have one. I think the last time that Perry Reed was in front of the commission, I'd asked about investments being made in the properties that you currently own here in Salina, specifically Chapel Ridge or the Ridge as it's going. What can you let us know about the investments that are being made there so far, what you have planned? Because it is, we do receive complaints about the living conditions in those buildings.
I stopped there today, and I thought it was I didn't view individual units from the exterior. I thought the exterior wasn't being well maintained. I can tell you this, for each project that we have a capital expenditure budget annually as we establish budgets, and we reinvest frequently in all of our projects, including replacement of interior carpet and certainly appliances within the unit, but the common area spaces we try to pay particular attention to, including paint and carpeting. So, and Chapel Ridge would be no different from that normal process. I don't have any specifics I can tell you right now.
Okay.
Don't have that information available.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. And thank you very much for making the trip from, I'm sorry, did you say you were based in Lincoln?
Yeah, from Lincoln. It was pretty easy drive down
Okay.
here, and watched a lot of harvest going on. And
All right, well, thank you for making the trip down here, and safe travels home. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I'll be available for questions if there are any.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? I got this a little out of order, but I'm trying. Any questions or comments from the public?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Eric Brown. I'm the President and CEO of the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. Just really quickly wanted to comment about the support we have for this, the items that city staff has talked about, Mr. Houston has talked about. Having a developer that already knows our community very well will go a long way. Also, the fact Papillion, looked that up, it's about 25,000 population, so they know communities our size in the Midwest. On the Live Salina plan, there's between $625 and $1,500 in rent. There's about a need for 400 some odd units. So those units, 1, 2s, and 3s, will really go a long way in supporting the existing businesses and also our employers that are trying to bring those folks in potential new businesses. So I would support, the Chamber supports moving forward with this and helping put together this plan. This also complements nicely the other developments that have come in front of you, Southview on single family, also Cedar Ridge, everything that's happening around this, but multifamily high density is really the biggest need right now. We're hearing from our business community to help support and get folks in the community. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown.
Good afternoon. I'm Mitch Robinson, Executive Director of the Salina Community Economic Development Organization. And I'm just going to copy Eric's comments and support for this project. We've worked with a developer on this, finding locations, looking for sites from the very beginning this summer and early last year, actually. So it's been a good process, and we're excited that this will be one of the projects we'll be coming up first, using some of the new tools the community has put forward, and talking with some of our industry people. They're very excited about the opportunities that are coming forward, and I want to thank everybody here with the city on that. So we're just in support, and we'll continue to be here supporting all the housing projects because, as you all know, we need them very badly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Any other questions or comments?
Commissioners, Chad Farber here in Salina. I want to echo that. I want to thank city staff for the work that's been put in on this project. I know there's been a lot of work put in, and I appreciate that. This is beyond needed here in Salina, and I think you're hearing that from everybody. So I'm hoping we can move forward with this and move forward quickly with it. I want to echo what the mayor said. There are complaints about Chapel Ridge, living conditions as well as security in there as well. And I don't know if that's something that you are heading up, but if we could pass that along. I understand this new development is for incoming businesses, which is going to help tremendously. But the connotation with Chapel Ridge or the association with Chapel Ridge, I don't want that to infringe on the rentability of this new project. So I'm all for it. I'm excited about this, but just a couple of comments about the other accommodations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farber. Anyone else like to comment? I will look to see if there's any, or if there are any online participants that would like to raise their hands, and we can unmute you, and you can offer your comments as well. I'm not seeing any, so, or you didn't see any either? Okay. Okay, so we're good on that. With that, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Yeah, I think this is something that's greatly needed. We haven't done a market-based apartment complex since I can't remember when, because neither Chapel Ridge or Prairie Glen was. And I'm glad to see we actually had an out-of-town developer willing to come in, because right now there's a lot of competition for these type of developments. So appreciate your investment in the community. So with that, Mayor Hodges, I move we approve resolution number 21-7991 with the amendment that the performance agreement be amended by striking section 3.5C in its entirety and renumbering the current section 3.5D to 3.5C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 21-7991 with the amendment as outlined in the attached material. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. And that motion passes 3-1. Which brings us to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of September 20, 2021. 6.2, award the bid for project number 21008, 2021 street markings to K&G Striping, Inc. in the amount of $63,870.30 with a 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $67,063.82.
Just a couple of notes. We received revised minutes. There were some characters inadvertently contained in the first version of the minutes. And then, Mr. Scragg, you had recommended that if we wanted to follow staff's recommendation, we needed to withdraw item 6.2?
Correct. Since staff's recommendation ultimately is to not award the bid and reject the bids, we felt it best to take that off of consent and have you formally act on that.
Okay, so we'll take item 6.2 off the consent agenda, and that leaves us with the minutes of September 20th.
Mayor Hodges, I move we approve the amended minutes of September 20th, 2021
Second.
meeting.
We have a motion and a second to approve the amended minutes of September 20th, 2021. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes 4-0, which brings us to item 6.2, and Mr. Stack.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Yeah, we had recommended that this not be awarded for today, just because we had only one bidder, and the bidder we talked to was really busy and basically just put a really large mobilization cost in there, so we didn't feel like it was a good time to accept this bid, and we'll try again later. It's not urgent. Some of these roads can wait as necessary, and a lot of times we have to remark them in the spring anyway, so we're just going to have to be stuck with that at this point. So that was our recommendation. Commissioner Hoppick had a few questions that we thought we'd try to address as well. Do you want to go through those, or want me to just go through the ones you've given us?
Go ahead. Just
Okay.
you got them.
Okay, some of the questions Commissioner Hoppick had, were a number of bike sharrows and bike lane markings are in this. We do have some that we try to refresh in here. There was about 35 of those, or 38 of those in this bid, and they're $125 a piece. That's what the bid was. That's fairly consistent over the last few years. We've gotten 100 to
$125. These are just paint, so paint's not as long-lasting as thermoplastic. Thermoplastic is what we put on our mill and inlays and our microsurfacings and some of our larger arterial road jobs. So those are more expensive, and those last pretty much the life of the road before we have to resurface it. Whereas the paint normally is just refreshing some of the older ones that we started out with. We started out with paint in the early 2015, 2016 timeframe. Most of those faded over time, and so we're going back and refreshing some of those, or also marking some of the concrete roads. We just try to mark a few concrete roads every year to try to catch us up, I guess. Not catch up, but we've got a plan. So I'll ask Scott to pull up our plan there. Scott, do you want to pull that up on the screen?
Which one did you want?
Street markings.
I guess I'll ask while he's pulling that up.
Yeah.
You know, I understand the bike lanes in certain areas. I guess if you could explain the bike shares. I mean, I drive down Edward Street all the time, and they're there, and I guess I don't know the reason for them, because people ride their bikes where they want to, and I'm not sure the $125 per bike share is an expense that I really understand why we actually do that continually.
Okay. Well, in 2010, I guess, the comprehensive plan, we had a bike plan in there as a comprehensive plan. It's a feature that either our commission at the time or our community at the time felt like a bike plan was one and part of the city's marking plan. So in 2012, 13, 14 timeframe, and it was actually adopted in 15, our bike plan. Go to the next page, Scott. Bicycle master plan was adopted. 39 miles worth of kind of our markings on our roads. We've completed 24 of those thus far up through this year, and have a few left to complete. And then a few really areas of town that we just cannot get to. A lot of it being the southwest part of town with the K-State Salina and the airport. So we don't have any roads or connectivity in that area really that we can get a sidewalk or a trail or a bike lane to. So that's been unfortunate, but basically in 2015 we adopted the plan, and then the bike community has historically been pretty active around here. Now, whether or not they get used, we have counters, we have our trails get used a lot. We do feel like they're being used some. We actually applied for a League of American Bicyclists, and we got honorable mention in 2016. So these markings are a part of that. Most of our competitor communities have really pretty solid bike communities as well, and it's just something our bike community. We have a bicycle advocacy group that helped us come up with this plan. Actually, this plan was interesting because if you go to the next page, Scott, just cycle through there a little bit. Let's go to the next one. Keep going. That's what the sharrows look like, and the bike lane markings look like. So they're an arrow, and that's why it's not cheap, I guess you'd say. It's not easy to put those down. They have to have a template, and they have to put in a couple of different symbols there. Keep going, Scott, next page.
That's actually in the bike lane, but I'm
Yep,
talking
that's
about
correct.
ones that are just in the middle of a street that's
Okay.
in a bike lane.
The sharrows, yeah, okay. Yeah, those we can't put a bike lane on every street, so if it's an actual bike route, then it has to become a sharrow, basically. And they're put anywhere from 4 to, that was the ordinance that adopted it, and there's all the whereases of why we did it, and how it replaces the map and the comp plan. There's the bicycle route map from 1980, the mid-'80s, I guess, and those were mostly with signs instead. So one of the questions you had was, is there any other options? How valuable are they? We used to just have signs. They were green signs all over town, and not as many markings. So there is, I guess signs is an option. I guess that was one of the alternatives that you asked about. And then there's The history of bicycle community in Salina.
Yeah, mine is people ride their bikes where they want.
Sure.
I'm not sure what those sharrows do if they're
Okay.
not in a bike lane. I understand the bike lanes, like going down Santa Fe and stuff, that's for the protection of the biker. So anyway,
Okay.
that was a question I had.
And if it's helpful, I think the comp plan conversation started with a recommendation for dedicated bike lanes. And we quickly realized that wasn't, that was expensive and difficult in certain locations. So a sharrow was kind of a compromise of, we won't necessarily build a bike lane, we won't dedicate a portion of the roadway as a bike lane, but we will take selected routes, put sharrows that are an indication to the bicyclist that that's an intended route for them. It's an indication to the driving public that expect bicycles in amongst traffic with you, but it was a cost-effective alternative to dedicated bike lanes.
And, okay, and I'm going to have to ask Commissioner Hoppick to help me with my math, but if I did my math correctly, we're talking about $4,700 worth of bike lanes out of the total.
For this year,
Okay.
right? For sharrows and, yep, shared lane marking.
Yeah, so about 10%.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just something that I wasn't sure why they were there, because you ride down the street and then you turn and you go where you're going and it doesn't have them. So anyway, just question. So
Yeah, I mean, it's an educational thing. It's trying to show the motorists. We've had them long enough now where people hopefully know that this is kind of the route that people pick to ride their bikes. So it's just something to look out for. But it's definitely up to the commission and the community whether we need them or not, or we want them or not. But this is what we've done so far. I was just surprised. 1911. There's a picture of 1911. Bicycles have been in Salina a long time, so they're a strong community and still are. So I just want that group will show up and strong support of these sharrows if we need them to. But I understand they are expensive, and I get beat up on the radio once a year. Actually, out more often than that from my friends down at one of the radio stations on how expensive they are. So I understand totally. We totally understand where you're coming from.
Mr. Teutsch, did you have something to add?
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, I guess I would just add, sharrows are typically used when there are no bike lanes and the routes are selected that have sharrows when the road is sufficient for both bicyclists and motorists. So the purpose or the primary driving reason that you see communities using sharrows is when they're completing a bike plan, they have roads that do not have enough space for bike lanes, and they want to indicate to both motorists and bicyclists that from a safety standpoint, there's sufficient space that a bicyclist knows he can occupy that space along with motorists. That's generally the reason why sharrows are used. I'm not advocating for them, but typically if you were to look up why do you use sharrows, that would be the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teutsch. Question for staff. If we select option number 4 and do not award project number 21008, do we need to make a motion and take an action specific to that, or does it just die if we don't take any action and staff will go ahead and rebid the project?
Staff would definitely go ahead and rebid the project. For the record, for the benefit of the contractor, in this particular case, it might be helpful to go ahead and make a motion and vote to decline the bids and not award, just so we're on record if that contractor ever had a question.
Right, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Any questions or comments from members of the public?
Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see anyone with a virtual hand raised, so I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we do not award project number 21008 and direct staff to rebid the project, likely with a July 1st, 2022 completion date.
second.
We have a motion and a second to decline to award project number 21008 and direct staff to rebid the project with a likely with a July 1st, 2022 completion date. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes 4-0. Item 7.1.
Item 7.1, approve resolution number 21-7989, authorizing the issuance of City of Wichita, Kansas healthcare facilities revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $200 million.
Mr. Scragg.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I don't want to be overly dismissive of this item, but I will keep it brief and let you ask questions if you wish. In 1990, we entered into an interlocal cooperation agreement with the City of Wichita, and it essentially was the City of Wichita issuing industrial revenue bonds for Presbyterian Manors Incorporated to make improvements in facilities in a number of communities across the state, including Salina. And so we were kind of, I guess, a signatory to that arrangement. On occasion, they want to issue additional industrial revenue bonds to make improvements to their facilities. That was done back in 2019, and we have another request today. It is not a bond issuance of the City of Salina per se. It is concurrence with an action that the City of Wichita has already taken. If we take no action, it'll be deemed that we concur. So this is really just kind of a ratification of the action that the City of Wichita is proceeding with, which is that issuance of $200 million worth of industrial revenue bonds. As noted in the fiscal note of the staff report, I've confirmed with the appraiser's office that Presbyterian Manor is statutory exempt from property taxes by virtue of its status and purpose, and so the issuance of industrial revenue bonds has no effect on its property tax status, and is addressed in Section 4 of the City of Wichita's resolution. Issuance of the bonds will result in sales tax exemption for sales of tangible property or services purchased in connection with construction and renovation of their equipment in Salina. So this is really our concurrence with an issuance being led by the City of Wichita for improvements to various facilities that Presbyterian Manor has across the state. As far as your options, you could approve Resolution 217989 that's attached. You could approve it with amendments, although we'd have to be mindful of what those amendments might be in light of the City of Wichita's action. You could postpone consideration, but given the timeline, we would be on the clock. You could take no action on the resolution before the deadline, which would be deemed to be approval of the request by the City of Wichita, or you could vote to deny, which would preclude application of the proceeds from any facilities in Salina. Again, no financial impact on us per se, whether it be property tax abatement or issuance of bonds. It's really concurrence with the issuance that the City of Wichita is pursuing. So with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Scragg? Any questions or comments from members of the public? All right, well, with that, we'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Mayor Hodges, I move we approve resolution number 21-7989.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 21-7989. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 4-0. Item 7.2.
Item 7.2, authorize the city manager to execute supplemental agreement number 1 with Wilson and Company for construction engineering services in the amount of $75,800 for northbound 9th Street Bridge replacement.
And sorry to put you on the spot, Mr. Stack. I know you were trying to get your materials up there on the
Hopefully
screen.
they'll pop up here. It's just nice to have a map to kind of
Sure.
explain what things are. This project, it's been in the works for a while. This is a bridge replacement on northbound 9th Street Bridge. We've replaced the southbound bridge in the 2000s and basically set ourselves up for connecting to it at this point. So, yeah, it's this section going north now. The southbound one looks pretty good. It has the decorative lights on the median, has some a nice brick pattern. So we're gonna basically we can cut off the bridge that's there, the old one, and then put a new one and tie it right to the existing bridge that was done in the mid-2000s. At the time, Wilson and Company helped us with that. They did the design for it, and did the inspection for it at that time. And so now we have a contractor that they did the design for this bridge as well, and we have a contractor that was awarded the contract in May of this year, and they're ready to start here pretty soon. And we are, as a staff, we are down one inspector, and so either way, I don't know if that would affect us, but we really feel like we need the help of Wilson to help us make sure this bridge is built according to plan. We know we have a good contractor, but it's just always good to have good inspectors out there to keep an eye on that for us, since we feel like they would do that for us. They know the plans is very well. They know the submittals, the drawings, all the shop drawings that we've gotten from the contractor. They've seen those, and so we feel like it's a good continuation or extension of our staff if they are able to help us with that. So we did estimate construction engineering in the amount of about $76,000, and that's what they're proposing here. And this is basically a continuation of the existing project, which allows us for the sole source, basically, method to select them. Next week, the contractor is supposed to start. And I do want to tell you this. The southbound approaches, we've had a water main break under one of them. So one of them raised and the other one settled. And back when those were built, they didn't have kind of sleeper slabs under them, which is a long story. But the bottom line is they need to be repaired. So part of this project is to repair a couple of those approaches. So actually next week you won't see any bridge work done. It's just they're going to be transitioning traffic to fix the southbound approach slabs, and then that'll take a couple weeks, and they'll start on the northbound bridge. And it helps them on schedule because everything takes a long time with materials and deliveries of all the construction materials these days. They kind of try to time it so that they get the bridge materials in November and get started. It's actually a pretty good winter job because there's hopefully no floods. That's the goal. No flooding. You can do bridge deck if it gets poured when it's cold. They have ways of heating that, and it's actually a really good cure on a bridge if you just keep it a cooler temperature instead of middle of July. It's not good for bridge decks because they're really hot when they get poured. So just a few construction details for you. So I'll sit here for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Stack? I learned something new about curing concrete on bridges today, so thank you very much. Any questions or comments from members of the public? I don't see anyone with their virtual hand raised either, so I'll bring it back to the commission.
Mayor, I move we approve the sole source selection of WCEA due to the continuation of an existing project. Authorize the city manager to execute supplemental agreement number 1 with WCEA for CE services in the amount not to exceed $75,800.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the sole source selection of Wilson and Company and authorize the city manager to execute supplemental agreement number 1 with Wilson and Company in an amount not to exceed $75,800. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes 4-0. Which brings us, I'm sorry? I was going to say, which brings us to item 7.3.
Item 7.3, approve resolution number 21-7983 related to establishment of a special improvement district in Cedar Ridge Addition Phase 2 and authorize city staff to accept bids for the improvements.
All right, Mr. Stack again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners, again. This is a continuation, really, of a pretty long project that started back in the early 2000s, actually even the late 90s almost, with the Marymount Road project and some of the rerouting of Cedar Ridge and part of the Cedar Ridge area. Bob Hayworth was a part of that, and he platted a 35-acre area and changed. If you could blow up the first one there. Just zoom in on that one, I guess. There we go. Start with kind of the original area. Make that a little bit bigger. This is the Cedar Ridge subdivision. Part of the, Cloud Street used to be here, and Marymount was here. So that was rerouted around through here and making this area kind of available for single-family, pretty nice homes, backing up to the golf course. Grand Prairie is over here on the northeast side. It was part of this, it was assessed for Cedar Ridge as well as part of Mariposa over here. Hasn't yet actually been developed. So that's a lot of history in this blue sheet. And then we talked about that in 2017 with the original request. Dean put all that together, so I will just say I don't take credit for all this history. This was a lot of his work, keeping us in line with all the different requirements of the subdivisions and the different phases. So brings us up to 2017 with a request by Bob Hayworth. At that time, we didn't have really a special assessment review process. We have some review factors now, and at that time, we didn't have those. So it was, and we had only just partially gotten to, when a developer brings a request to the city commission, it was staff, you prepare everything and get it ready to go. So that used to be kind of the system. In the 2013 timeframe, I guess, we changed that from will to may. So it was basically a developer would ask or request that, and then the city commission would act on that. So they would say, that is it something we want to pursue or not with special assessment financing, and at what level? Well, it was really hard to figure out what level because we didn't really have a great checklist. We did have a checklist. I don't want to dispute that, but it wasn't as precise as some of the advisability factors that we have now. And at the time of Hayworth's request in 2017, we were just kind of working on that. So the City Commission did authorize us to proceed with preparing feasibility report, but they also said we'd like to look at it when you bring it back to us with a lot of the factors that you're preparing. So during the time after that, we staff put together those review factors, and some of them were also factors related to percentages. So there were some percentages depending on how much participation the city would want, depending on the kind of home that was going to be constructed or the kind of subdivision development that it was. So that was a factor as well. That was changed, though, in 2018 to really 100%, the 100% participation by the city. So at this point, that's what we brought back to you today, was 100%. There was 75%. There was 80% on a couple of subdivisions prior to that, but we're back to 100% assessments now. However, the review factors exist, and it is the city commission's authority or option to whether they want to go forward with this kind of a subdivision, depending on the subdivision and the amenities and the developers, the cost of the home, all those things. So then we put together all the review factors associated with that. And going through those, we have to estimate the impact of the subdivision on life cycle of our roadway, of our water and sewer system, and kind of look at how many types of lots are available in Salina in that price range. And it's a different time now. Back in the mid 2013, 2017, it wasn't quite as hot of a market, I guess you'd say, as you've heard today with the Magnolia Point development, with the kind of where we're at in homes in Salina. There isn't that many houses on the market anymore or even in this price range. So as we looked through that, we did go through all of the different subdivisions, how many subdivisions have been approved, kind of the specials associated with each subdivision, the average specials. So yeah, these specials are going to be clearly quite a bit higher than some of them. There's good reason for that, but that is a factor to consider. Cost of the homes is $375 and above. There are really about 26, or we said 25 existing lots available where we actually have infrastructure, which is water, sewer, and a street to actually construct on. There's a lot more platted lots out there, but they don't necessarily have the infrastructure to build on. So there's only about 25 that we could find where that's the case. So that's where I messed up on, Commissioner Hoppick asked that question. He said, we don't have 25 homes on the market today to even buy in this price range. He is correct that we have 25 lots we can build on, but we have, from what we can tell, based on the MLS, which is the, Dean came up with that, it's like the Great Plains MLS. we can't find more that, we didn't find any. There's not one house in the $375,000 to $400,000 range that we could find on the market based on the MLS. So that's a change. That was a bust in here. I got those confused. So that number is 0. That's the revised sheet that you got from Giovanna just a little bit earlier, from city clerk earlier today. So as we go through the number of lots, number of homes available in that price range, any other factors that are in here, looks like, just really it connects to East Cloud. That is a bike route, so it has some connectivity to another subdivision. It also has connectivity to a bike route, which does have Sharrows on it. That's Cedar Ridge Drive. It has Cedar Ridge does have a sidewalk on it. Connects to a park over on Markley. Connects to Marymount. So it's got the connectivity. We did not find any City-Go transit in that area. And this is phase 2, which is the request for today. Looking at the kind of the history, this is the subdivision that was platted. Next slide, Scott. This was kind of the phase that was platted first. Phase 1 went along, what is the name of that road? Whatever that road name is, I do not remember what that is, and I can't see that from here. The next phase is phase 2 over here, and then phase 3 is up in this area, and that's the Cools have estimated that to be in 2024 approximately. They believe these lots will build out in the next 3 years or so, and they'll just go on to the next phase. Next slide, Scott. Here's the plat. Roll that down, but it's as you can see, there's the couple of cul-de-sacs and a connector street right here. Basically, that's this phase has already been done. Not all those lots are built on, but I think there's just a couple left. Next sheet, Scott. Blow that up, and that's really the same thing we just looked at. It's the kind of shows the water and sewer and the storm sewer. It's kind of what the subdivision will look like. Storm sewer does connect over here to the Elks Country Club, or not the Elks, sorry, Great Life, the pond and on that right across the long number 5 there goes into their system, and that was planned for Cedar Ridge back in the early 2000s when they did get the rights to do that. The rest of it drains north, kind of through the Cedar Point area, which just came to commission last week. Cedar Point's on this side, right up in here, and then goes through our golf course and ultimately into Mariposa's Pond, way up in the corner up here. It's number of lots. It's I can't remember how many there are, 16 maybe, not very many. Make sure I get that right. 13 lots, okay, 13 lots, thank you. The assessments are estimated at this point, $54,000 for assessments. It could range lower than that depending on construction prices and whether or not they decide to assess all that. They do have a few options on how much they assess, but that's kind of the maximum that we believe it should be based on the estimates we have. We do have a subdivision that was recently completed. It seems like costs are just going up it seems like a lot, but we feel like Wayne Nelson has done this, and this is also an engineer that they have, Caw Valley, done these costs. What's the next slide, Scott? Let's go to the next one. Okay, one thing that always comes up with the petitions is, do they have any delinquent specials? We've basically come up with a system now where we have the county treasurer sign this document. Go to the bottom of that, Scott. They sign that there are no delinquent specials and no ad valorem, whatever it says, no delinquent specials or ad valorem taxes owed by the applicants. We get that on there. We're trying to do that with every one of them. And then lastly, this is the flyer. Talks about the subdivision, and this is the pools put this together. Talks about their amenities that are here in their subdivision. And if you go to the next page, it talks about the lot values. So those lots will range anywhere from $48,000 to about $88,000, depending on the size of the lot and where it's located. So that gives you as much as I know about this subdivision. And we are, Dean, myself, and the pools are here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stack. Any questions for staff? Either Mr. Stack or Mr. Andrew? I see that the applicants are here. If you would like to speak, this is your opportunity to do so if you'd like.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Stephanie Cool, 1531 North Burma Road here in Salina, Kansas, and I'm representing Cedar Ridge Development. And just some context, if you'd have told me a year ago today that I would be standing here in front of you as a developer asking for you to approve this benefit district, I would have said you're crazy. However, fate and faith brought us here today, and we truly appreciate your consideration of the request before you. We went into this venture with the mindset of building high-quality homes and helping to ease the housing shortage that Salina is facing. It is our hope to be part of the solution, but we can't do it without your approval of the benefit district. Before agreeing to the purchase, we researched the market, reviewed comps, talked with other developers, realtors, appraisers, banks, city officials, business and community leaders, people in other trades, and most importantly, our family. We believed that if we priced the lots competitively and surrounded ourselves with builders who shared our same values, ethics, and integrity, that we could achieve success. We see this development as an unofficial partnership with the city and the community as a whole, and took a giant leap of faith that the Live Salina housing study truly captured the current and future needs of housing in our community. We fully recognize that the costs of the infrastructure that are presented here today fall outside the norms that you have seen for developments. We wish that the numbers were different, but we do have some solutions for your consideration. If you look at the breakout of the infrastructure costs, and I'm not sure what page that's on in your information, but I'll just tell you what the number is, and hopefully you can get to that. As we know, the cost for the infrastructure for this development is $703,000. The first opportunity for savings is the $27,000 in engineering fees that can be reimbursed to the developer. We fully recognize that by Kansas statutes, we are entitled to get those engineering funds back, but we're willing to waive those costs because we've already kind of calculated that into our costs of the lot, so we're okay with waiving that. The second opportunity for potential savings is that the $703,000 reflects the utilization of concrete versus asphalt paving for the roads. It's our understanding that most of the developments utilized paved roads versus concrete. So if allowed to use asphalt, that would reduce the cost of the infrastructure by roughly $49,000. Third, the current calculation allows for a 10% contingency. When we were working with the numbers that Cobb Valley had presented, we were using a 5% contingency, so we're hoping that potentially, we only have to get into a 5% contingency there. And then this last one, and that's probably, I'm probably reaching a little bit, but I'm gonna throw it out there, is that there is an allowance for $8,000 for grubbing and clearing, as well as $8,000 for seeding. I don't know if it's even possible how much we as developers can do ourselves, but if that is an opportunity for us to potentially help savings towards this, the infrastructure costs, we would like to explore that as a possibility, if it's even allowed. So with these adjustments to the estimated cost, according to my calculations, theoretically, we're looking at a savings of roughly $117,000 from the $703 that was originally presented, bringing the adjusted cost down to $586,000. So that would get the projected cost of the specials down to $45,076 per lot, or $3,005 per year, or $250 per month. We feel that for the client that is likely to purchase the lots in this area, that the amount aligns with the development in this area. We can't do this development without your approval of creating the benefit district and funding specials at 100%, and we appreciate your consideration here today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Cool? All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Any questions or comments from members of the public? I don't see anyone online either, so we'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
I guess based on Mrs. Cool's comments, I look at city staff and She mentioned concrete versus asphalt. How and when is that decision made?
You may recall that a lot of times we look at the life cycle costs. We see what we get in the way of bids and how competitive the numbers are. But on occasion, we will look at concrete and consider the life cycle costs and recognize that while it costs more on the front end, it's a higher value on the backside. And so that's a decision that's typically made once bids are in and we see what the numbers look like.
Yeah, we typically try to do alternate bids just because you get the numbers right there and you can make a call on it. So historically, yeah, asphalt has been cheaper in the past or more economical, but then it got to a point really in 2008 when I first got here that it was concrete actually won straight up many times. So whether we know that now, we don't exactly know. It depends on the market and whether our asphalt contractor is real busy and whether oil prices and concrete, it's just really a market-driven thing. So what we'll do is just get alternate bids and bring it back and let you know.
And one of the things I did want is, I did go out because I had brought to Mr. Scragg's attention the 25 houses for sale in this price range.
Right.
I actually found 5.
Okay.
Not to, I mean, the zeros, but, and one of those was out in the country at a little over $1 million. So actually in that 350,000 above, I found actually 4 on multi-lists that were active.
I looked on Zillow and I found 3.
So I actually had somebody pull the multi-list, and that's where we got the 5.
Were they?
One's at $1 million, one's at 650,000.
There definitely was some in that range, and Dean saw that.
I can explain. I also have a copy of the multi-list, and all of those 5 were above 600,000 in price, so we didn't think they were comparable.
Right.
The multi-list does show 5 homes that are 600,000 or above, but since we didn't think those were comparable, we were reporting on the $375,000 to $400,000 price range. So we didn't just look at above 375, we were looking at that range. So that accounts for the discrepancy between 0 and 5. But we were looking at the same thing.
Oh, Mr. Andrew, before you sit down, I did have one more question, unless you've got further
No, go ahead.
questions for him. So where do we stand right now in terms of, there's a lot of information here in terms of the lots that are available. Where do we stand on buildable lots in Salina right now? Is that the 60 or is that the 25 or?
Well, what the 25, the only thing the 25 number tells you is that those are the number of lots that are actively being listed. They're listed and actively being marketed through multi-list. You also have subdivisions where there's a realtor or broker that has a specific, has those listings and they're not open to anybody else. The 25 lot number is, those are lots that are openly on the market for anybody
anyone.
to purchase.
Okay.
And the number of buildable lots is higher than 25. It's just that some of those are exclusively listed. And so what we've tried to do, the better numbers is we try to summarize by subdivision the number of lots. I think as I look through this, the best place to put that is we've looked at specials, and then what we've tried to do is when the commission approves specials for a particular phase, we just take the total number of lots minus the number of building permits issued in that phase to give the total number. And so we just recently started issuing building permits in Phase 3A of Stone Lake. And so that number reflects the total number of lots minus the number of building permits that we have already issued.
Okay, and that would be the 60?
Yes.
60 building lots, okay. And you bring up another good point, which I think would be a question for the Cools. Are these going to be buildable lots that are open to any contractor, or are these going to be exclusively developed and built on by Cool Construction?
Appreciate the question. And what we have done originally is we have aligned ourselves with 5 other contractors that we know and trust and have done business with or have come highly recommended to us as being able to preserve the integrity of the build and the high quality that we made a commitment to Bob when we purchased this. That was his request, that we do try to maintain the integrity of the build. And so these are certainly builders that we know and trust. That doesn't mean that we will not allow other builders to come in, but we certainly will go through a vetting process and a referral process and things to have other builders. Our goal is to get this development up and going, and we felt that we could do that with the 6 builders. And again, figuring 1 to 2 houses per year, because again, these are going to be customs homes. These are not going to be cookie cutter homes where you're just building, X, Y, and Z model and, going on and on and on. So, and if I could, the one thing that I think is a little bit different from our lots than some of the other lots that may be buildable or coming soon are that these are larger lots. These are oversized lots. That's why there's only 13 in this particular plat. And so that does accommodate a larger home, better custom homes. And we have met with executives from the manufacturing communities as well as members of the the medical community who are saying that there is a demand. They need a place to house their executives, and they're looking forward to this development, if approved, going through. So,
Thank you very much, appreciate it. And I'm sorry, Commissioner Hoppick, I kind of hijacked your
Nope,
your questioning
that
there,
was-
so I'm sorry to interrupt.
Nope, you're fine.
Any other discussion or action? I'm just going to share, there's something that I just have, speaking for myself, it's hard for me to swallow doing 100% at homes that are going to be custom homes above a 375 price point. And I'm struggling with that right now. And so at any rate, if anyone wants to make a motion.
Yeah, I think, over the years, like, you guys kind of know where I fall on this. I believe that spatial finance or spatial assessments is just a financing tool. We have small developers like the Cools, I appreciate stepping up, that don't have you always have to buy the ground, and I'm guessing they'll build a house or two, and you have to borrow for that. Putting in infrastructure and borrowing from a bank is very difficult for small developers to do. Over the years, we've shown basically a 0 default rate on spatial assessments. So I know we talked about 375,000. I remember we used to talk about affordable housing being, and now affordable housing's in that 200 and some thousand, or when I say new construction of any type almost because of construction costs. So even though 375 sounds like a lot, from being in the business, it's not as unusual to see that as we used to. So, so I guess with that being said, I move that we approve resolution number 21-7983 and authorize city staff to accept bids for the improvements.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 21-7983 and authorize city staff to accept bids for the improvements. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. That motion passes 3-1. And best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Item 8.1.
Item 8.1, approve ordinance number 21-11082, changing the zoning classification from A1 to I2 on 3 lots located on the east side of Airport Road, north of Waterwell Road.
All right, Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Recently, the city's development review team met with a business person that was interested in establishing a construction equipment rental business on the east side of Airport Road. And prior to the meeting, staff reviewed the zoning map for that area, and when we met with them, we informed them that the site they had chosen was zoned agricultural and not for industrial use. And we looked back and looked at the history of that, and the area was platted for development in August of 1998, and our current zoning map goes back to 1977. And when we looked at that, it just seemed like it was something that was overlooked in 1998 when the plat was laid out, so this is something that the airport authority is requesting to correct or clean up at this time. There's no good reason for the property to be zoned agricultural, other than it was probably part of the airport runway system at some time and didn't get adjusted in 1998. Much of the surrounding development is zoned I-2. We have the Saline County Road and Bridge and the former Casa Controls building out there. The predominant zoning is I-2. The uses are industrial in nature, and so this would not really be a change from the character that's there and could be viewed as just a correction or cleanup. And so when we informed the airport authority of the situation, they immediately submitted this application, and the Planning Commission recommended approval of this change at their September 3rd meeting. So this comes to you with their recommendation to change the zoning. You have the option of concurring with their recommendation and rezoning this property to I-2 on first reading. You could refer this application back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration, stating your reasons for disagreeing with their recommendation, or you could overturn the recommendation and choose to deny the attached ordinance. And the result of that would be this property would retain its agricultural zoning and be limited to uses allowed in the A1 district. This would not allow for any equipment rental business on the site. So with that, staff would be open to any questions about this. I think staff was almost as surprised as the business person to find that it was zoned agricultural, but we checked every one of our maps and they all showed the same, that it had never been changed. So,
Interesting. Any questions for Mr. Andrew? No? Thank you very much.
thank you.
Appreciate it. Any questions or comments from members of the public? I don't see any. Don't see anyone here. We'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor Hodges, I move we concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve ordinance number 21-11082, changing the zoning district classification on this property from A1 agricultural to I2 light industrial district on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve ordinance number 21-11082. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 4-0. Item 8.2.
Item 8.2, approve ordinance number 21-11083, changing the zoning classification from A1 to PC5 on a 9.4 acre tract of land located at the northwest corner of South 9th Street and Waterwell Road.
Mayor Hodges, I will be recusing myself on this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoppin.
Mayor and Commissioners, this is an application to change the last piece of property in the South 9th corridor north of Waterwell Road that hasn't been platted or developed at this time. And there's numerous references to 1999 in our report, and that was the year that Long MacArthur Ford announced that they were relocating from Santa Fe out to South 9th Street. And the city and the county were no way prepared for that relocation. We had no infrastructure, there was no water, there was no sewer. The road improvements had not been contemplated, and so there was a study committee formed, and then a plan was put together to create a benefit district for water and sewer extensions and for annexation of property. And then there was a South 9th Street corridor overlay district that was adopted by the City Commission at that time. And that overlay district requires that all zoning applications either be for a planned commercial or a planned development district. So this is a request for planned C5 zoning. The overlay district has a much more limited list of uses than you would find in the standard C5 district. And in this particular case, in addition to the 6 uses that are allowed by right, the applicant has requested the addition of agricultural implement dealers, building supply stores, convenience stores, discount stores, farm and ranch supply stores, food stores, gasoline stations which have a car wash attached, hotels and motels, and restaurants. So because this is a planned district, it does require that site plans be submitted for review by the Planning Commission prior to issuance of a building permit. The applicant has requested that submittal of those site plans be deferred at this time until there is a specific development proposal for the property. So we have summarized for you some of the development standards there. There is some architectural design standards, and the design and appearance and exterior materials of buildings is reviewed by the Planning Commission. As part of that, this particular area was recognized in the community that there was really a lack of sites available for automobile dealerships that need a large amount of land but don't generate a large amount of traffic per acre. And so this west side of 9th Street has been identified as a suitable location and was set up accordingly. This particular property has 424 feet of frontage on 9th Street and 727 feet of frontage on Waterwell. The comprehensive plan shows this as suitable for service commercial development, and so rezoning this property to allow service commercial businesses would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this application on September 7th. They voted to recommend approval of the zoning change from agricultural to Plan C5, subject to satisfactory plating of the property. And I would call attention to the conditions they had are on page 6 of your report. And so the first condition deals with just listing out the uses that would be permitted on this 9.4 acre site. Second item deals with the sign limitations, and so the sign limitations are a little stricter than they are in a straight C5 district. The third item requires that final site development plans would be submitted and approved by the Planning Commission prior to issuance of any building permits, and then they would need to come back to you with their final plat before there was second reading and final approval. So with that, I'd be open to any questions that you have. We also have Mr. Jeff Mays here, who's representing the prospective buyer, if you have questions of him. But I'd be happy to address any questions you might have about the South 9th corridor.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Any questions for staff? No?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any questions for Mr. Mays? No. You're welcome to comment if you'd like, but it looks like we don't have any questions for you, so. Okay. Any questions or comments from members of the public? And I don't think I see anyone with their virtual hand raised online, so we'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 21-11083, changing the zoning classification of this property from A1 agricultural to PC5 planned service commercial district on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 21-11083 on first reading. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that motion passes 3-0, and we can recall Commissioner Hoppeck. All right, that brings us to other business. Are there any items that commissioners have to bring up under other business? I just had one thing. I think it was at last week's meeting. Commissioner Davis had asked for an update about the Law Enforcement Advisory Board, and I believe staff did provide some information on that. I just wanted to let you all know, I reached out to the board members directly just to ask how things were going, any areas of concern, because we have had 2 resignations from that board since its inception, and it's a relatively young board. And I'm absolutely delighted to report that the feedback that I got was universally positive. about how that board is getting up and running. And the 2 resignations that we had were both due, one was due to a work relocation, and another was due to a work schedule that absolutely could not be moved and conflicted with that time. So I found that very reassuring, and I just wanted to share that with all of you. So if there's nothing else, I guess I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.